The Joint Special Committee to examine functions at hotels for housekeeping staff will come to order. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Lang. Senator Rogich.
Here.
Assemblymember Backus.
Present.
Assemblymember Cole. Assemblymember Flanagan. Chair Flores.
Present. Please let the record reflect that all members are present and we have a quorum. I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon to engage in obviously a very important conversation for this state, particularly for those of us who are in the hospitality industry. There is a clear reason why we are the gold standard across the world, and the objective and the goal is to continue to be that, is that we work together and we collaborate and that we ensure that the humans that wake up every single day and ensure that our hotels are the gold standard of the world are safe themselves too. I want to start off before I move into some additional remarks. I want to give an opportunity for folk to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves so that you know who's sitting before you. But before I move into that specific conversation of introductions, I want to let you know that I did not have an opportunity during the legislative session to personally work on the creation of this committee. I was not involved in that conversation. I know that there are stakeholders in this room that worked on that diligently, but I personally was not involved in that. And I make that point because coming into this conversation and today, I needed to provide myself an opportunity, having not been involved in any of these conversations, to really create a very overarching scope of what we're trying to achieve. Ultimately, and as I've mentioned already, it is clear to me that as the gold standard, that does not come without work, that does not come out without direction, and it doesn't come without the people in this room working together. So the very first thing I did is that I reached out and I wanted to publicly thank Ms. Virginia Valentine. I reached out to her initially and then also to Culinary, who are, in my opinion, two individuals, or better said, the two voices that I rely on when it involves this industry. And I had an opportunity to reach out to them and ask them what those conversations were like, because again, I wasn't in the room with them, what the objective they thought was for this committee, and how they saw those conversations going. It was shared to me in speaking with different industry leaders and different people that there wasn't a lot of direction that was given at that time either. And so that then allowed me to move into the direction that we are now, which is I wanted to create large conversations of buckets, right? And in each bucket, try to address some of these questions. If we are the gold standard, are we doing everything in our power to ensure the safety of all the workers? That is incredibly important. Are we doing everything in our power to ensure that we continue to attract folk to come to our beautiful state and our beautiful city, and that they are on our strip, that we continue to do that because we rely on tourism. I myself, I come from a family who my parents worked in the casinos for many, many years. And my mom was also a member of the Culinary, right? And so I firsthand saw the importance of those lights having to turn on every day. It's what fed my family. So I am incredibly indebted and grateful to the gaming industry because it's what allowed my family to eat. And I'm also incredibly indebted and grateful to all the workers that are here because you remind me of my mom, right? You wake up every single day, and the protections that come from organizations and unions like the Culinary is what allowed me to have glasses. It's what allowed me to every single day wake up and know that if I got hurt, that I had a bill that would be paid at the hospital thanks to the Culinary Union. It's also the very first time that I saw my mom be very proud. She was proud to wear a maid uniform. She was proud to go to work. She was proud that she was taking care of her family. So I make those points because I need you all to understand just how grateful I am to all the humans that are in this space and how grateful I am to our gaming industry that allows us to feed our families every day. So with that in mind and with that objective, We have three large buckets that we created, which is guns, drugs, and human trafficking. And the reason I focused on these three large buckets is because we understand that the people that are on the front lines, the people that wake up every single day that are in those casinos for 8 hours, you're seeing this firsthand. You're the first line of defense. You're hearing it, you're seeing it, you're addressing it. You're who's responsible at the end of the day in a room where this is being exposed to you. And if that is the reality, then I wanted to make sure that I understood it better, and that we had a data-driven approach to understanding these issues. Because quite frankly, even as I've been reaching out to different stakeholders, and we have the most important stakeholders, in my opinion, some of them weren't able to make it, but we reached out to all the stakeholders who see these issues firsthand themselves. And we reached out directly to them, saying, please share the data that you have. And we realized that unfortunately, there isn't always a lot of data that's being collected on these conversations. So it will also be very helpful for us to hear directly from the first line of defense, the first workers, the people that are there every single day, to share with us anecdotally what you're seeing and you're hearing. So with that, I again thank all of you for being here and taking time out of your days to engage in this conversation and educate the committee on how we can be better stewards of all the work that you do and better facilitate tomorrow for the greater benefit of the state and the greater benefit of your individual families. With that, I'd like to first, before I introduce you to our amazing staff, as you all know, none of this happens without our wonderful staff. They are an extension of everything we do. They are consistently reminding us of what we got to do. So I want them to be acknowledged and introduce themselves so that you're in good hands. But before I do that, I'm going to hand it over to our legislators. Legislators, if you could just please state your name, how long you've been in office, the district you represent, and some of the things that you're hoping to get out of this committee. And we'll start off with Senator Lang, please.
Thank you, Chair Flores. I'm Senator Lang. I am the Assistant Majority Leader of the Nevada Senate. I represent Senate District 7, which is over by UNLV and then goes east. I'm excited really to be on this committee. I felt like we did some work at the legislative session for the Resorts Association and safety on the Strip. And now we get to really do some work for the people that work on the Strip. And so I've met with Culinary, I've met with, I had a call with the Resorts Association. I'm excited to move forward and see what we can do together.
And next, if we could go to Assemblymember Bacchus, please.
Thank you so much. Our chair, my name is Assemblymember Shay Bacchus. I have the pleasure of representing Assembly District 37, which is in our northwest portion of our Las Vegas Valley. I've served 3 regular sessions and 5 very special sessions. And I have the pleasure, I just got done this last session serving as the chair of revenue and the vice chair of ways and means. I think for me, I am a product of this Las Vegas Valley. I'm a 3rd generation Nevada, and just growing up in this valley when our main economic engine is doing well, Nevadans are doing well. And so for me, I think that's kind of what my view is, and I thank Speaker Yeager for appointing me to this committee. So thank you, Chair.
And next we will go to Senator Brovich, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to see a lot of friendly faces here that we've met before and had great conversation. I look forward to working with my colleagues and stakeholders to support efforts that make Nevada's resorts safer for the workers who keep them running, the guests they serve, and the victims that must be protected. I'm also a regulatory compliance lawyer and a special needs advocate. I help families with children that learn differently. I offer my services pro bono, which is for free. And so it is a pleasure to be here. I represent State Senate District 11, which is in the southwest area of the valley. And that includes Blue Mountain, Mountain's Edge, not Blue Mountain, Blue Diamond, Mountain's Edge, Enterprise. And so thank you for coming today. And I look forward to getting some really great work done.
Thank you, Senator. And next we'll go to Assemblymember Flanagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Assemblymember Tanya Flanagan. I represent District 7 on the north end of the valley, predominantly North Las Vegas and the sliver of Las Vegas. I also worked with Clark County. I've been with the county for 23 years and also spent some time in gaming working for MGM Mirage Resorts at the time, now MGM Resorts International. Also looked at the Valley through the lens of being a journalist. So looking forward to this conversation. I've served in the last session and special session, served with Assemblymember Backus on revenue as well as on government affairs and education. So I have had the pleasure of having some conversations about this issue with the Culinary Union. So looking forward to what we accomplished this afternoon and in this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for being here. And then next, if we can go to Assemblymember Cole.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Lisa Cole. I am the Assemblywoman for District 4, which is in the northwest part of Las Vegas. I've been in office for a total of, a year and a half, something like that. So one regular session and one special session, very special session, as you said. What would I like to get out of this committee? I'm happy to be here to serve and have conversations, listen, and try to be a voice of reason and common sense so that we can work on whatever problems there are that get to listen to and work together. Thank you.
Thank you. And then next, if we could, we'll start on the very far right, and then we'll just kind of make our way towards the left. If we could start with Mr. Asher Killian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Asher Killian, Legislative Counsel. I'm here as co-counsel for this joint special committee supporting our lead counsel to my left. Been the Legislative Counsel for a few years now. I've been with the Bureau for about 20 years and excited to do anything we can do to help support the work of the committee.
Good afternoon, Daniel Pinato, Senior Deputy Legislative Counsel. I've been with the Legislative Counsel Bureau and Legal Division for several sessions now. Most recently, in the last session, I supported the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Alex Drozdov. I've been with the Research Division of the Legislative Counsel Bureau. I've been with LCB for about 6 years now, and I'm looking forward to serving as the policy analyst for this committee. Thank you.
And we also have our committee secretary in Carson City.
Good afternoon. My name is Amrita Singh. I'm Deputy Legislative Counsel. I've been with the Bureau for about a year, and it's a pleasure to be here.
And then certainly there's other additional individuals like our amazing LCB staff that is here in the building. Would you all, and also our LCB police, and thank them. We do have some more folk in Carson City. Would you both like to introduce yourselves there? I think we got the camera on you now.
Thanks, Chair. I am Crystal Rowe. I am the Assistant Manager of RPAs with the Research Division. I've been with the Research Division since 2018, and this will be my 4th interim.
Hey, hello, my name is Michael Fellman. I'm part of the ITS division here at the LCB, and I've been here for about a year and a few months.
Wonderful. And then to all the staff that's behind the scenes, thank you to all of you. Before we move into the agenda, or better said now so that we can move into the agenda, we'd like to open up for the first round of public comment. As you all know, we will be having public comment both at the beginning of each meeting and at the end, just in case anybody's following online over the phone or online and unfortunately cannot provide public comment at this time. Please know that you'll be able to have a second bite at the apple at the end. I want to remind folks to please limit your public comment to 2 minutes. All of you have an opportunity to upload, email, and submit public comment when it is beyond 2 minutes. Please feel free to do so. We encourage you to do that. It will become public record. Everybody will be able to see it, both in the committee and folks who are following the committee's work. So we always want to encourage you to do that. At this time, we'd like to open it for public comment. Anybody wishing to join us, feel free to occupy any one of the 3 seats that you see here and or in Carson City. Seeing none coming forward at this time, we will go to those wishing to provide public comment over the phone.
Thank you, Chair. The public lines are open and working, but there are no callers to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you. And just for the sake of clarity, if for those of you wishing to submit any comments in writing, you can email those to housekeepingoperations@lcb.state.nv.us. Again, housekeepingoperations@lcb.state.nv.us. And you can also call 888-475-4499. Once again, 888-475-4499. That's also included in our agenda for those of you who may have missed it. Next, I'd like to present the committee brief, and we will go back to our policy analyst, Ms. Drosov.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Alex Drozdoff, Committee Policy Analyst for the record. I will just provide a quick overview of the committee brief, which you have in front of you. The brief reviews the members, staff, and powers and duties of the committee, including its allotment of one BDR, which must be submitted by September 1st of this year. Additionally, the brief reviews the requirement to submit a report of the committee's findings to the legislature and, to the extent practicable, provide its report and any recommendations to the governor on or before July 31st of this year. The recommendations must include any further action to be taken to housekeeping operations at hotels and additional recommendations for legislation necessary to housekeeping functions for consideration during the upcoming session. Again, the brief is available in hard copy and online for review, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you. Next, we'll move to agenda item number 3. We'd like to thank and welcome representatives of the Nevada Resort Association. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Virginia Valentine with the Nevada Resort Association. And I want to thank Chair Flores, Vice Chair Backus, committee members for inviting us to give this presentation today. We want to provide you with some context around the issues that the chair mentioned. But first, we want to start with who we are. I think most of you are familiar with the Nevada Resort Association. We're the primary advocacy voice for the gaming and resort industry. We represent 70 resort properties and 23 corporations. To be a member of the Resort Association, you must have a non-restricted gaming license and meet the statutory definition of resort hotel. To give you a little context on the role in the economy, we want to start with the top line numbers here. Hospitality and tourism, I think you all know, is our state's largest industry. Generates $98 billion in statewide economic activity. That's 37% of Nevada's gross domestic product. Maybe more importantly, it supports 437,000 jobs. That's 28% of the state's total employment. Pays about $25 billion in total wage and salary payments, and pays taxes and fees that total 34% of the state general fund revenues, or $2.1 billion of the total $6 billion in the general fund. That's in FY24 numbers. That's probably one of the more significant statistics to think about in terms of how the tourism industry impacts the state general fund. As you know, we're a tourism-based economy. Decades ago, gaming was legalized for 4 reasons: to attract tourism, to create jobs, to generate tax revenue, and to drive capital investment. Today, our industry continues to deliver on all these metrics and more. I'd also like to point out the substantial indirect economic impact our industry makes by supporting other businesses in the community, including lots of small businesses. Things like construction, contracting, goods and services, things that support the industry, linens, florals, convention services, professional services, all of those things that create jobs indirectly. We can drive these economic benefits due to the tourism infrastructure we've put in place and due to overwhelming number of hotel rooms. Las Vegas is home to more hotel rooms than any other US city. Worldwide, we are in the top 5 for the number of hotel rooms. 8 of the world's 15 largest hotels are in Las Vegas. Here's a fun fact: it would take a person nearly 412 years to spend one night in every hotel room in Las Vegas. No other city can match that, which is why we can host events like CES, ConExpo, ConAg, and why the NFL will bring the Super Bowl back. These rooms generate about 46.8 million in annual room nights, and those room nights mean room taxes, which totaled 1.2 billion statewide in FY 24. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I did want to mention that those room taxes collected on those rooms, which are paid by visitors, of course, also benefit critical services for residents. Things such as building schools, roads, and providing local government services, and of course, marketing and promoting the destinations. To ensure those rooms continue to generate revenue for the state and local governments, our members invest millions in keeping them modern, competitive, and also clean and attractive to guests. The resort industry understands that the value of successful housekeeping operations comes down to the team members. Employees are safe, supported, and properly trained with the resources needed to do their jobs, as well as how to report suspicious or illegal activities such as human trafficking. They are trained on the say something, see something model. I'm going to take a deep dive now into some of the safety measures in a moment, but I want to emphasize that there are enhanced safety provisions for housekeeping staff. GRAs, or guest room attendants, carry or have access to personal safety devices or panic buttons. They can request accompaniment to occupied guest rooms. They can press their personal safety buttons if they need security to respond right away. Our members have robust and detailed mandatory guest welfare checks for employee and public safety on those rooms where room cleaning service may have been declined for more than a day. In today's world, many guests do not want daily room cleaning. Many of them choose to sleep in or work from their room during the day. There are a lot of reasons they may want to stay in the room, and of course, our members work very hard to accommodate customer choice and guest preferences. The safety and security of our employees and guests is always our highest priority. And of course, security teams work for our members as a 24/7, 365-day-a-year operation. So starting with an overview of resort security, it is a force multiplier for Metro and other law enforcement. If you consider that Metro has a little under 5,000 FTEs across the entire community, that's excluding detention, and thousands of resort security personnel our members provide on site, they provide a substantial enhancement to safety, but there are only 306 officers to cover 3 shifts on the 24/7 operations inside the Convention Center Area Command. The industry invests heavily in professional security staffing that exceeds traditional models used by private entities. Our members directly employ complex and comprehensive internal security and surveillance teams that include armed and unarmed officers, canine units, bike patrols, corporate investigators, control room operators, dispatchers, emergency management experts, and many more. Many of these employees are former law enforcement or military. These teams operate under a supervisory command structure and go through extensive training, including security academies, armed training, emergency response training exercises, very similar to Metro's, and they train for active shooter incidents, human trafficking situations, and basic security measures and procedures. Again, using the see something, say something model. Additionally, team members have the option of reporting illegal activity anonymously if they are more comfortable with that option. Staffing levels are adjusted for high volume weekends, holidays, large trade shows and conventions, and special events. To add another layer of security, the resorts hire outside security firms to supplement and provide additional support, and they will hire and pay overtime for off-duty Metro officers on every weekend, holidays, and for special events. Beyond personnel, the industry spends multi-millions on surveillance and technology systems on property and in parking garages. I don't want to get into too much detail on this as a matter of maintaining confidentiality of operational security, but I can share some high-level insight. They have an abundance of cameras throughout the property, including parking garages and gates, hotel areas, hallways, back of house employee areas, entertainment venues, and on external doors. Resorts provide safety or panic buttons for guest room attendants, valet workers, cocktail servers, and other employees that work in remote areas or alone. There are panic buttons in various important places also on the casino floor and in the restaurants. Resorts have secured access areas around critical infrastructure. They used enhanced video analytics, facial recognition, weapons detection systems, and these security resources are all funded by the resorts, not taxpayers. and represents significant private investment in public safety to protect the hundreds of thousands of residents that work in our tourism areas, along with our tens of millions of visitors. We have very strong partnerships with law enforcement at the local, state, and federal level. They are all in constant communications, sharing information, having meetings, and all of these efforts are ramped up even further during major citywide special events, like New Year's Eve or CES, when there is intensive coordination. They work with Metro, FBI, the Gaming Control Board, DEA, Secret Service, CIA, DHS, and of course, fire departments and local governments. Our members have policies and procedures on firearms on property, illegal narcotics, and human trafficking. We gave a comprehensive presentation on Tuesday to the Interim Judiciary Committee on human trafficking work, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that later. I do want to share one member's policy, and this I found actually right on the internet, but in talking to security chiefs, I can tell you they're all very similar. Except for on-duty law enforcement and special events with advance approval, firearms are not allowed on property, including in vehicles. Knives with a blade length of greater than 4 inches are also prohibited. Should a guest arrive on property with a weapon, it must be checked with security on arrival. It will be safely secured and returned to the guest upon departure or as necessary. This policy is in place even if the guest has a CCW permit. Active law enforcement only can carry if on duty or unless approved by security. Use and possession of illegal narcotics on property is prohibited. GRAs are trained to report anything they suspect to be suspicious or against the law inside a room. Again, see something, say something model, and they always have the option of making an anonymous hotline complaint. Resort security is typically the first line of response for employees and guests. Resort security, they see all kinds of incidents. Most of them are petty or nuisance crimes that can ruin a vacation. Most of these incidents are committed by repeat offenders, which is why we were focused on order outs in the resort court. I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. Resort security works with the victim and alerts and hands off to law enforcement for arrestable offenses, criminal activity, and things that cannot be resolved by resort security. And I believe Metro may be speaking to you about that later in this presentations. We are committed to safety. We appreciate your support of AB4. It contains some very important provisions related to tourism safety. It created enhanced penalties for assault or battery committed against a hospitality employee, and that was incredibly important to us. This puts them in the same job class as law enforcement, first responders, utility workers, school employees, transportation workers, and taxi drivers. It also affirmed Clark County's authority, or I should say county's authorities, to establish order out corridors in tourism areas. It provided stronger penalties for repeat offenders and order out corridors. For a first offense within the corridor within 2 years, the offendee may be prohibited from entering the corridor for a period not to exceed a year. On a second or subsequent offense within the corridor within 2 years, they shall be prohibited from entering the corridor for a period of not less than 1 year. This allows for the resort court, the bill also allows for a resort court and requires reports to be regularly submitted to the Nevada Legislature and the Clark County Commission. Why AB4 mattered to us: it provides enhanced penalties to an assault or battery committed against a hospitality employee, and that was incredibly important, again, for the safety of our team members and as a deterrent. It protects Nevada's reputation as a safe place to visit. As you all have experienced or you know, one small incident can become a headline around the world, and it really impacts the perception of safety and people's interest in coming here for a vacation. It also addresses chronic recidivism, stronger enforcement of trespassing. We believe very strongly that the resort court was successful when it was in operation. What we were seeing at resorts was a reduction in recidivism. We've been working on tourism safety for a very long time. During my 15 years with the association, this has always been a top issue for us. We have regular meetings and communications with federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies here in Southern Nevada and in Northern Nevada. We work very closely with the Gaming Control Board and its agents, who are law enforcement. And of course, we have a long history of working on local government ordinances to keep our tourism areas safe. Some of those ordinances, such as no glass or no backpacks during certain events, obstructive use zones to ensure the free flow of pedestrians, the order out corridor, and pedestrian flow on bridges. At the state level this past session, we worked with you on extending the look back period of time from trespass to 24 to 36 months. I want to thank you for that too. We also have supported the installation of bollards on Las Vegas Boulevard, supported building LVMPD substations and kiosks on or near Las Vegas Boulevard. And of course, we supported the More Cops sales tax. Over the years, we've supported a wide range of security measures. We also worked with the GCB on regulations to make hiring armed security guards more efficient. We support law enforcement by advocating for federal funding or supporting items like air support equipment for Metro and the Southern Nevada Human Trafficking Task Force. And we advocated for having federal SEER rating raised during F1. We've been very proud to partner with law enforcement in helping keep Las Vegas safe. I think the third bucket you mentioned, Chair, was human trafficking. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dawn Christensen. She's our VP of Communications and Corporate Responsibility, and she will discuss our work on human trafficking.
Thank you, Virginia. Good afternoon. Thank you for letting us be here. As Virginia mentioned, we made an in-depth presentation on Tuesday to the Judiciary Interim Committee. So this will be a little bit briefer and just a few highlights from that presentation. You know, there is a tremendous amount of meaningful work happening across Nevada resorts to foster a culture of awareness, vigilance, and prevention. Our members work hand in hand with law enforcement every day. They have strong policies, protocols, and reporting procedures in place to identify and address suspected trafficking. They provide in-depth specialized training for employees and reinforce that training through ongoing back-of-house awareness campaigns to ensure that the message remains front and center. As you heard from Virginia, it's reinforced with see something, say something. Hotline information is posted in discrete locations such as restrooms to assist those seeking help when they are ready. In addition, our members work closely and provide substantial financial and volunteer support to a number of nonprofits dedicated to assisting victims and survivors. All of this is sustained intentional work, and it reflects our industry shared commitment to being part of the solution. In addition to our members' individual work, the association has created an anti-human trafficking working group. To our knowledge, there is no other community in the country where competitor resorts come together in a sustained monthly collaboration dedicated exclusively to addressing human trafficking. Now in its 8th year, our anti-human trafficking working group continues to produce action-oriented initiatives. The group includes approximately 40 representatives from nearly 20 member companies with participations from resorts in Northern Nevada. Our valued industry partners, Tall Hospitality Group and Harry Reid International Airport, also participate. Members span multiple departments within their organizations with representation from senior leaders in security and surveillance, legal and compliance, and many other departments, as you can see on the screen. The group meets monthly to collaborate with one another, law enforcement, nonprofit partners, and individuals with lived experience to strengthen education, enhance awareness, and drive prevention efforts across the resort industry and throughout the broader community. Most of our monthly meetings begin with a guest speaker who helps deepen our understanding of the issue, highlights emerging trends and tactics, shares best practices, or brings greater awareness of community resources available to assist. This forum has helped deepen relationships with law enforcement and community partners and enhance the industry's protocols, procedures, trainings, and policies. We've welcomed a long list of local and national experts from all these subject matter experts, along with individuals with lived experience who bring valuable perspective to this work. The monthly forum allows members to bring timely issues to the forefront to continually enhance the efforts to combat trafficking and provides time for members to share best practices and success stories with each other. For the past 3 years, the association's working group has led the planning and execution of the association's Human Trafficking Education and Awareness Summit, solely for the resort industry. This complimentary event features in-depth presentations from leading experts, elevates awareness on emerging issues, and brings industry colleagues together to engage on shared priorities. Here you can see on the slide is a snapshot of some of the experts who have presented at the summits over the years. And each year we strive to bring new and engaging content. The summit has been extremely well received with strong survey feedback and growing participation, including attendees traveling from Northern Nevada to take part. And planning is already underway for our 2026 summit. Every January, our working group comes together as an industry to raise awareness and recognition of National Human Trafficking Prevention Month and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Wear Blue Day on January 11th. And here are just a few examples of the industry's external awareness efforts. Iconic landmarks turn blue, prominent marquee messages, and social media posts, all on January 11th. Properties also encourage employees to wear blue, and some distribute blue ribbons to employees in support of the initiative. In addition, members have dedicated internal communication efforts, town halls and trainings throughout January, reinforcing their human trafficking policies and procedures and reminding team members of the warning signs to watch for. For the past 6 years, our working group has also co-hosted a free statewide human trafficking awareness webinar for the resort industry during January. We've partnered with Truckers Against Trafficking, a well-respected national nonprofit, and the Southern Nevada Human Trafficking Task Force to host these events. We've invited a wide spectrum of experts to present over the years. Again, participation has been consistently strong, even reaching resort workers at members' properties in other states. Each year, the webinar is focused on a different topic to ensure continued learning and engagement. So for example, this year, the topic was labor trafficking and the signs and red flags to watch out for. Beyond these educational efforts, the group has worked on other very important projects. We worked closely with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department to elevate the priority of response calls from resort properties where there is a potential victim seeking assistance in leaving a possible trafficking situation. This has helped reduce response times, allowing a possible victim to receive help sooner. Members also collaborate with one another and with law enforcement during major citywide special events to share timely information about traffickers and missing victims as appropriate. In 2024, members provided significant financial support for the trafficking awareness efforts around Super Bowl 58, including the It's a Penalty campaign, which helped launch the I'm Not a Souvenir initiative that remains in use today. Several years ago, in partnership with Signs of Hope's RISE program and Metro's Vice Unit, the group helped develop industry best practices for trauma-informed, victim-centered responses to potential victims. That collaboration further strengthened the industry's participation with the RISE program. To share more about that work, I'd like to turn it over to Caspian Mathis, Outreach Director with RISE.
Thank you, Dawn. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about the RISE program and the role that cross-sector partnerships play in strengthening our response to human trafficking and exploitation within our community. We are a local nonprofit program here within the community, serving survivors of sexual violence for about 52 years now. Our RISE program is our small anti-human trafficking program under that umbrella, and we've been in existence for about 6 now. Our RISE program works with individuals who experience or may have experienced exploitation or any form of human trafficking at any point in time within their history. We provide crisis response services, advocacy, and resource coordination. A key component of our work is partnering with a myriad of industries within our community. And providing training, resources, and guidance that help all persons recognize potential indicators, respond in trauma-informed ways, and know when and how to connect individuals to supportive services. One way we support this partnership within the industry is through technical assistance and on-site resources. We work with some properties to provide materials that individuals can access publicly or discreetly if in need of support. These include resource cards, QR codes for all of the local resources and partnered entities within the task force, as well as mirrors with hotline information and other small personal items such as chapsticks that contain that additional and vital information. We also assist some properties with the creation and review of signage, ensuring that materials are trauma-informed, accessible, and multiple and various languages, as well as placed in locations where someone may be able to seek information or self-identify with either the designated or appropriate entities amongst all industry properties personnel. These resources are designed to strengthen systems responses, increase opportunities for identification, and ultimately ensure that safety, dignity, and confidentiality remain essential to any sort of response. Another key component of our work is training. We have been invited and included to the table by many industry properties, providing monthly, seasonal, and annual trauma-informed trainings tailored to the various roles within the hotel and hospitality industry. These trainings draw on professional expertise, as well as insights and invaluable feedback from survivor and lived experience experts, as well as other industry and frontline personnel. This ensures that information provided is uniform and aligns with the current and ever-evolving landscape. In 2025, we were able to deliver more than 80 trainings across the industry, including to corporate leadership, operations teams, security departments, regulatory partners, human resources and compliance teams, workforce staff, and all other frontline workers. Another critical support that we're able to provide is through our hotline resource coordination. We have the ability to not only respond in person, in real time to our trained persons and partners within the industry, we can do a lot of that coordination as well via the phone to ensure that that is done in an expedient manner, and if that is the deemed appropriate response. Our hotline allows those trained professionals, inclusive of hospitality personnel, individuals themselves, to contact us 24/7 when encountered and may be in need of any support should they choose to request services and supports. It is an option that is available to them, not something that is mandated. We are then able to provide advocacy response and services. We assist with providing guidance, discuss safety considerations, coordinate resources, and any other support to determine appropriate responses. Through these partnerships, we have seen many examples of how industry personnel have stepped in to support individuals in meaningful ways. For instance, some of the hotel and resort properties have generously supported the program by helping fulfill donation needs whenever we are in need of crisis response items to provide to those individuals encountered. They've also provided additional contributions that directly support the services, as well as directly supporting the program in support of survivors. In other situations, personnel have contacted our hotline on behalf of an individual who did not have access to a phone at that point in time, providing them with a confidential space, the information regarding our program, so that they could have a conversation directly with an advocate in the middle of the night. Staff ensured that the individual was safe, also additionally accompanied them to the rideshare area where lift coordination was provided by the advocate teams, and the individual was able to safely get off property and to their final destination for emergency shelter and later on for relocation out of state since they were not a resident here. An additional example has been when personnel also provided immediate care while waiting for law enforcement and advocate response. They took it upon themselves to offer water and food and providing other comfort items such as pillows, robes, and blankets, so that the individual feels safer and more supported in that time while they await kind of next steps. Additionally, hospitality personnel have contacted the hotline to report concerns, share information about situations observed, whether that was in whatever scenario that might be, whether it be for adults or minors, to ask questions, to ask about resources, to disclose, whatever the case was, that hotline is available to all persons at all points in time. These calls have allowed advocates and partners to then discuss the appropriate next steps, recommend approaches, and ultimately, again, connect individuals to the resources requested. The work that we're doing with partners focuses on strengthening systems response, ultimately increasing identification, and mostly and most importantly, ensuring that individuals who may be experiencing exploitation have access to safe and essential support at all times. And I'll turn it to Dawn. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. That concludes our presentation. We hope we provided some context for the first meeting of the committee, and we'd be happy to answer questions if you have them.
And thank you, all three of you, for the presentation and that overview. We really do appreciate that. At this time, we'll open it up for questions. Members, any questions? Senator Lane, please.
Thank you for that. It was very informative. I just have a question about, do you experience more issues, the issues you brought up, on your strip locations or off strip locations? Is it about the same, different?
Chair Flores,
And please do go direct. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Lang, I do not have any data on that. Metro may have an idea, because what would happen if there were an incident in a room, that would get reported up through the chain of command. At some point, that chief of security or a security person would decide this rises to some arrestable offense. At that point, they would call Metro. And once Metro is on the scene, of course, then there becomes a data point where they may have some sense of that. I do not, sorry.
That's okay, thank you, I'll save it.
Save it for Metro, thanks.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none at this time, I want to again thank you for your presentation. Look forward to working alongside of you to address and continue to have these very important conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
We will continue down the line, and we do have a presentation via, excuse me, our next presenter will be joining us via Zoom. Are we ready for that? Do we know? Yes? Good afternoon, Assemblymember Krell. Thank you for joining us. I understand that you're in the middle of doing some very important work, and you couldn't be here in person, but we do appreciate you joining us whenever you're ready.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so sorry I can't be there in person. I really wish I could be in the room with you all today. But I did just want to share a little bit about human trafficking, some of the things we've been doing in California. And let me start with this, and it's just kind of a broad overview of human trafficking, because if you don't really understand what it is, it's hard to know what we're really talking about and what we're looking for. And it's one of those terms that sounds a little abstract and maybe sounds like somebody being kidnapped in some other country, people coming over on a van. All of that might be true, but it also happens in every community of the United States. And it doesn't require any vans, and it doesn't require any elaborate kidnapping schemes, and it doesn't require airplanes or anything like that. It can happen in the farms in California. It can happen in the nail salons in New York. It can happen in motel rooms in Las Vegas. It can happen at truck stops outside of Reno. It can happen in any industry and in any location in the United States. Human trafficking is an umbrella term that encompasses both labor trafficking and sex trafficking. And it's really the nature of what's happening, that somebody is being coerced or forced to perform either a sex act or some act of labor without being free to leave. So it can happen in the hospitality context, where somebody's being forced to do work and being paid very little, or not being paid at all, where they're not free to leave, where they're sleeping, where they're working. It could happen, in a nail salon, where somebody's documents are locked away and they're being threatened that ICE is going to be called if they don't stay and work overtime. It can happen in the agricultural setting, and we also know that it happens frequently in the sex trade. So I'm going to focus a little bit on sex trafficking, and I'll tell you too that the first real sex trafficking case I didn't realize it was a sex trafficking case at the time, but I started out before I became an assembly member, and I should say I'm an assembly member representing Sacramento, California. I'm in my second year of my first term, and prior to this, I was a career prosecutor that handled human trafficking cases throughout California. So when I first started my career, I was actually a deputy DA in a place called Stockton, California, in San Joaquin County in the Central Valley. And I had a busy misdemeanor calendar with prostitution cases, and it was all the defendants were women. They were all in custody. They were 18, 19, 20 years old. They were arrested with barely any possessions. Most of them didn't even have a contact listed in the police report, very little property. And I looked at them and just thought, how has this happened? Why are these girls being arrested in the middle of the night at this seedy motel, wearing barely anything, in a parking lot in the dead of winter? Who's looking out for these girls, and who is benefiting from clearly the misery and the suffering that they are undergoing. And at the time, this is 2003, 2004, we didn't have an anti-human trafficking law yet in California. We had, pimping, we had prostitution, we had various other loitering offenses that dealt more with, quality of life in the neighborhood than they did with the victims. The United States first passed its anti-human trafficking law in 2005, and afterwards California and many other states followed suit. But at this time, it wasn't really a concept that was being discussed, but we could tell that what was happening was dead wrong. And all of the victims, they were classified as defendants, of course. I saw them as victims, were being arrested at the same motel. And so this first case that I made really was about going after the motel for knowingly benefiting from what was happening there to these young women. And that is what really set me on my career in the anti-human trafficking movement. So after that, a lot has happened. The legal landscape has rapidly evolved. We are so much better off than we were back then. In fact, it's music to my ears hearing about the great work that the resort industry has done in Nevada. That there's monthly meetings, that there's best practices, that there's so much information sharing and collaboration between nonprofits, law enforcement, and the resort industry. That's so important. And I would say, to this committee, to this hearing, that really those who work in hospitality are on the front lines. Not only do they have the potential, unfortunately, to have some of the vulnerability factors that could make them susceptible to being victims, but they also have the potential to be protectors of victims. They are the people who can make that phone call, who can see something and say something, who can help. So that's why it's so important that we are helping them have the tools to protect themselves and protect everyone else from human trafficking. I'll give you, a little bit of some of what I've seen done that's been successful. It sounds like a lot of that is happening in Nevada already, but trainings for any employees that could potentially interface with human trafficking. Obviously, the resort industry, other industries too, in terms of transportation. I'm working on 2 bills right now in California, actually, that would expand curriculum in education, both in the college setting and K through 12, to discuss human trafficking in different contexts. So training and awareness are really important. Another aspect is the postings. We do have a posting requirement in California where certain locations that are likely to interface with a human trafficking victim have a posting with a 1-800 number. Putting the bathroom stall postings I've seen be effective. So I'm glad to hear that that's already in place in Nevada. Also, truck stops, transportation hubs. We've seen this be successful in airports as well. And then just making sure that this is probably the most important thing and one of the hardest, but making sure that there's adequate resources for survivors. A law that we passed last year in California includes a fine paid for by buyers, $1,000 a pop, that will go into a survivor support fund. And that fund will be used to support nonprofit organizations that are doing the tough work in the community of helping victims escape from trafficking and rebuild their lives. So making sure that these nonprofit organizations are fully funded, are able to do the critical work they're doing, in the community to help victims. And it just in terms of the support, what that looks like. And, I've had victims that I worked with, 10 years ago that are now, graduating college. So it's really rewarding to see when victims have proper support and resources, where they can go and what they can achieve, and that they just really need a chance and some support. But it takes a lot. It's really difficult. I mean, this is a crime that really devastates people. So it's housing support, it's mental health support, all kinds of health support, actually, job training, and just, being able to transition into healthy work environments. So making sure that there's adequate support systems for survivors it's just, I would say that this should be the center of everything. And then I'll just tag on to the last the last panel just about the coordination with law enforcement and making sure that everybody's really rowing their oars in the right direction, that information is being shared appropriately, that the nonprofit organizations and the victim advocates, get to be part of, any raid that's happening at the beginning so that they can interface with the victims from the beginning and support them through the conclusion of the case. It's really important. The result isn't just success in court, but it's successful outcomes for survivors as well. So I will leave it at that because I'm on Zoom. I can't tell if you're falling asleep or not. I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions you might have.
And thank you again for joining us via Zoom. Members, any questions? We'll go to Assemblymember Bacchus.
Thank you so much, Representative Krell. I was just kind of looking at your AB 379 fact sheet, and I was kind of curious because just like I've traveled and I've actually represented children in our foster care situation where some children have been subjected to human trafficking, like even out of our care facilities. But I was curious, I saw that one of the bullet points in your bill was protecting minors. Can you kind of elaborate a little more on that if possible?
So the part relating to minors, and that bill was signed into law. So currently California treats the purchase of a minor for commercial sex as a felony. I think that's been the law in Nevada for some time. And of course, that's the law under the Federal Trafficking Victims Protection Act. But California had a gap for 16 and 17-year-olds. So ensuring that those who are exploiting children receive, the potential to be sentenced as felons, obviously helps deter that kind of abhorrent behavior, protects children.
Thank you, and thank you for participating with us today.
And members, any additional questions? The only question that I'll ask is, in the work that you've done in your respective state, how difficult has data collection been? And, I understand that in every state we have really good actors operating often in silos. For the safety of the victim, for the whole host of reasons of why that happens. But I'm curious to know, overcoming some of those barriers and some of the challenges in getting an actual understanding of what that landscape looks like in terms of a data-driven conversation. Please, any insight you could share with Nevada?
Yeah, Senator Flores, that's a great point, and it's a real challenge, and I think it's a challenge that's ubiquitous. I can tell you that I've had so many conversations where I've had to explain that not only is that human trafficking is just woefully underreported for many reasons, that victims don't self-identify as victims, or victims do know that they're victims, but they're afraid, they don't trust law enforcement, or they're more scared of their traffickers than anyone else. So this is really an underground problem. So by nature, we're not going to get a full data set on it. But then even aside from that, as you identified, Senator, the information sharing across agencies has not, has just not been adequate. I don't feel like I have adequate numbers of the scope of the problem in California. There was a study in Sacramento, it was a university here partnered with a community-based organization. They got some data that gave us some general numbers for this region. It was much higher than what we had from other data that we had. And there's always the Polaris website with some information specific to different industries. But I think you're absolutely right to be concerned about the difficulty with data. I would look to arrest data, not just for human trafficking, but for related crimes like pimping and pandering, prostitution, solicitation, everything in that bucket. But again, that's just what law enforcement knows about, and it's been such an underground issue. I'll just add, I mean, the other piece of that is the information that you will get from community-based organizations. I mean, they're often helping victims that law enforcement never sees.
Thank you. And I suspected that would probably be the kind of the barriers and challenges that we have in our state are not unique just to our state. While we may have a very unique industry here, the data side of it is just always so difficult to obtain for all the reasons you've indicated. I know that you are in the middle of your own work respectively in your state, and I do appreciate you taking the time to work across states. Obviously, this is a problem that is not unique to a single state, and working together is just know that you have allies, friends, and folk that will want to continue working with you here. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate you having this hearing.
Thank you again. Next, we will invite Arizona State University and Las Vegas Metro to please join us at the dais. And we thank you for the work you do and for joining us today. Welcome. Good afternoon, whoever wishes to go first. And I just want to remind you to please state your name for the record. And because there is 3 of you, there'll be times where we're asking questions and you may decide to popcorn through those questions. Just please state your name for the record so that it's abundantly clear who's answering. Thank you. Whoever wishes to go first.
Hi there. My name is Dr. Dominique Gross-Sepowitz. I'm a professor in the School of Social Work at Arizona State University. I'm a research partner with Las Vegas Metro Police Department. We've been working together for 12 years. And I'm here to present to you a little bit about the background of human trafficking, some information about what we know in Nevada, some of the data that we have from the Las Vegas area. A little bit about my research office. I'm actually going to go to the next slide. We have a number of projects. There are very few research centers in the United States that study human trafficking specifically. Ours is even more unique. We don't just do research, we do practice. We're about 50% practice. So I also am the clinical director of a human trafficking housing program for sex trafficked women and their children. We have 15 apartments in Phoenix, Arizona, and we run the state human trafficking hotline. So the state of Arizona decided 3 years ago to have a state human trafficking hotline through our state police, through the Department of Public Safety, and we are the recipients, and I lead it with 2 survivor leaders and a native Spanish speaker manning that 24-hour hotline. That's statewide, all 15 counties. I started working with law enforcement through a number of different grants. I work with the Tucson Police Department, the Phoenix Police Department, the Las Vegas Police Department, and we have a new relationship with the Maui Police Department. Combining research and law enforcement is pretty unique to let an outside entity come in and look at their data. And our first data share agreement started in 2013. So we've been doing this a long time with Las Vegas. And really our goal is to have data-driven policing. So having information for the human trafficking unit, the vice unit, to make decisions based on that. I have a number of other projects that we do. We do monthly outreach with law enforcement in my community. All of those things are really trying to expand the work that we do in human trafficking, arresting our way out of this, trying to find people through traditional means has been very unsuccessful. We have not seemed to stem the flow of human trafficking into our communities. And so we really pride ourselves in this partnership and innovation. And so oftentimes we try something in my community in Arizona and it's transformed into action here. So outreach for labor trafficking, hotel stings without arrest, things like that we're able to experiment with, collect data on, and find successful interventions. So a lot of my work, I work very closely with the sheriff here. We're working with sheriff's department around the country, trying to understand what sex trafficking behind bars might look like, how many people who are behind bars are impacted by human trafficking, and how can we work with them directly in that setting. So we do a variety of work. This is one of my key projects. So just as an overall basic knowledge, I know the presenter before us very gently talked about what trafficking is and what the definition is. And I think for sex trafficking, which I think we're primarily talking about today, it's important to note that the TVPA was only passed 26 years ago. That's our federal law for human trafficking. This is the definition for sex trafficking. Globally, the Palermo Protocol was passed, and 183 countries have signed that Palermo Protocol. So the global definition of human trafficking is very similar to the TVPA. The key elements of the legislation is that if a person is under the age of 18 and they're exchanging sex for something of value, $1, a lunch, a place to stay, drugs, money, that they are identified as a sex trafficking victim. A person who turns 18 has to show that there's a third party involved. A trafficker could be a parent, it could be someone related to them, but they have to show that someone else benefits from it. Those criteria are important to us for a number of reasons. For example, to move into my housing program, which is affiliated with the city of Phoenix and HUD, it has to meet that federal criteria. So every person who calls my hotline, they also have to meet those criteria. They're important. So what we know, so what our research here has done is we have 12 years of research on human trafficking. The majority of our data is on sex trafficking. And I'm just going to give you some big numbers and big understanding. The victims ranged from 11 years old to 58. Oftentimes those younger victims are trafficked by a family member. That 58-year-old is being trafficked. We've heard cases in my community. We had a 67-year-old who was being trafficked for sex, but also to be beaten, right? They're sold for other things. Our clients are also oftentimes forced and coerced into doing other things like commit crimes, run drugs, rob customers, right? That forced criminality is an important piece to consider, right? That 11-year-old to 58 years old. Primarily, our data is on females in this area. Some of that is because that's who is screened, that's who's looked for in lots of different ways. People are more likely to set a warning about a girl or a woman that they see as opposed to a male or a trans person. So we know much more in the research literature about about females. We're working to change that. Among homeless youth, we actually see 1 out of every 5 male unsheltered youth are trafficked, and 1 out of every 3 unsheltered female is trafficked. So we know that it coexists. We just haven't been able to find it in some of our research places. So 60% of the people in the Las Vegas area who are being trafficked are also from Nevada. That's important. That means 40% are not. So how you provide services is determined if they're local, if they have a local support system. Those things are important to how we make decisions about resources and support. So how a victim advocate works with someone who's from somewhere else is quite important. Some of the risk factors that we see in the literature as we take those case data is running away is the primary reason that we see for trafficking involvement. Traffickers have to find that victim. They have to have access to them somehow. And an unsheltered child, an unsheltered person, a person out of their parents or group home care is extraordinarily vulnerable. And there's some research about if a person runs away, a child runs away more than 4 times, it's the Dallas model actually, that they're highly likely to have been trafficked. Other things are child welfare custody. The majority of the cases in this area are the children are in child welfare custody. We've talked over the years about if they've been reported missing, how long they've been missing, and those are also important variables. High ACEs scores, so high adverse childhood experiences, histories of growing up in homes with parents with mental illness, parents in prison, drug use in the home, neglect, both emotional and physical neglect, sexual abuse, and physical abuse. Those are high in the communities that we're serving who are being sex trafficked, both children and those who are adults. What a high ACEs score, if that's interesting to you, a high ACEs score of 4 or above is a shortened lifespan, more intense health issues, more likelihood to be involved in substance abuse, and just simply have a harder life in many different ways. What we know also about the risk factors that the young people that are in the case data that we have, they're limited connections. They're less likely to be involved in sports, less likely to have trusted adults in their life, and less connectiveness into schools. 20% overall, and that's a national study that we've done in a bunch of different places. About 20% of young people who are involved in trafficking have been in a special education setting. Traffickers are quite clever about who they approach and who they attempt to traffic, and a person who's experienced special education services may be more naive, maybe have less prevention offered to them, may be more vulnerable in lots of different ways. The issue around risk is that that person has to be available to a trafficker to find them. So we have many people in this area who are vulnerable, who have had difficult lives, come from places that are complex, they're involved in the juvenile justice and the child welfare system. And if they never meet a trafficker, they will not be trafficked. The issue is how that trafficker makes contact with that victim. As we move over to sex traffickers, one of the most important parts of this relationship is really understanding who's trafficking people and how we can stop them from ever trafficking people, right? How do we start at the beginning for them as well? How do we do prevention? And so what we do know is that the age range of traffickers in this community are between 14 and 70. The vast majority, 96%, are male. We have some of the research that we've done has shown that they're specialists. Only 3% traffic both a child and an adult at the same time. Most are one or the other. And that's important as you think about data-driven policing, our approaches to the community, that if you're following a case of children being trafficked, it's less likely that you're going to find an adult. It's helpful to have those nuances. Sex traffickers find victims in a variety of ways. We're seeing a lot of online action, things like Discord, places where kids are gaming, but also where kids hang out, parks, malls, places where talking to a stranger is appropriate. We also see that a lot of traffickers find people that they know. So they might have gone to high school, 2 years ago they graduated, they're going to reach back out to them on Facebook, or it might be their sister's friend. So someone that they're connected to, that they have access to that person. There's a number of techniques that are important to know, that there are different approaches a trafficker takes. We see very, very limited stranger, boogeyman, grab a victim, pull them in a car and traffic them. I always say that the people at Costco that are following those families around are nefarious, right? They're not doing good things, but they're very unlikely to traffic your toddler or your young child. They're going to do something else, but trafficking doesn't look like that. Trafficking is about building a relationship, whether it's an uncle that is trafficking a child, whether it's a neighbor, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a person, a trusted friend. It's the approach, that grooming that happens, and that recruitment. And then of course they have to retain that person in this situation of exchanging sex for something of value. And that's when we see the violence escalate. So initially, that initial consent doesn't generally have violence to it. It's a coercive relationship promising of a big future. And then we see violence be used as that retention tool. Forced criminality is something we really think about on a national level. We're talking about this in courts where people who are being trafficked are charged with crimes either alongside their trafficker or independent of that trafficker, but they were under the control of that trafficker. If you can force someone to prostitute and give you the money, you will also be able to convince them to run drugs, deal drugs, rob banks, right? Under a person's control is a very significant act we see that traffickers have over their victims. There is extreme violence that we see in the cases in this community, everything from sexual assaults to beatings to death. We see the lethality of traffickers as they try to control a person to make money for them and to live that pimp prostitution lifestyle is extraordinarily violent. And the clients that we serve in all of the ways that we do through our hotline, through this amazing RISE program that you got to hear about, the experiences of our clients of victimization and violence is really incredibly high. Another thing to consider, and I think that Las Vegas Metro Police Department can speak to a little bit, is that traffickers are poly offenders. We rarely find traffickers in our case files that their criminal history only has trafficking. pandering, right, earnings from a prostitute, we almost always see all these other crimes. So large percentage of them have domestic violence, child abuse, gun possession, drug possession. So poly offenders, people who are kind of causing havoc, causing trouble throughout their lifespan. One of the most important pieces that we've received out of the data from Las Vegas Metro Police Department is that their first arrest of traffickers on average is 17 and a half. And that means that we had an opportunity while that person was a juvenile to make contact with them and ideally prevent them from turning into that trafficker later. So how do we create programs where there's prevention about people not only responding to victims and helping them, but preventing people from trafficking victims ever? Sex buyers are a little bit more complex. They are heterogeneous. They look like everyone. They are everyone. There are husbands and our fathers and our brothers and our grandfathers. They're primarily men, but there are female buyers. There are about 39 sex buyer diversion programs around the country. Those are, if you're arrested for a misdemeanor for buying sex, you go to like a one-day class. Portland has a different program. Peter Paulatine there has a 6-week class. But changing a person's mind about buying another person for sex is complicated. Attitudes, beliefs, and knowledge, understanding that that person might be a victim, understanding that person might not have the ability to make a decision not to, has been a pretty complex problem. We've done research over the years on buyers, and they're just everyone. So how do we tell the community that buying another person, whether it's a child or an adult, is unacceptable? How do we get that message across? And again, that goes back to prevention. Do we tell boys and men, like, don't buy other people as part of that conversation about buyers? What we know is they're primarily male because that is who is caught in those situations, especially from law enforcement. They're married, they're not. They're wealthy, they're not. They're all types. In diversion programs around the country, about 60% have to go on a payment plan to pay for that diversion. It does not indicate wealth. So they're not necessarily the wealthiest among us. They're all of the people among us. There are multiple techniques to try to divert people from buying sex. There's online interventions where people place fake ads and they talk to the buyer and they try to dissuade them from buying sex in the future. We have those one-day classes, that 6-week class, so different ways to divert. So some of the things that we've talked about from a research-led perspective and really trying to think innovatively, right? This is not the world's oldest profession. There were farming and raising, animals, other things that happened before this, but prostitution and the exchange of sex for something of value has existed as long as we have documentation of humanity. So who are the victims? What services will help prevent that reentry? We oftentimes see our clients kind of come in and out of that prostitution lifestyle, right? Getting someone out is just part of the process. Keeping someone out is the next piece. What are some of the support needs? They're different by region, they're different by person, they're different by age, they're really complex. And the web that we have, remember, our laws are only from the year 2000, we're only 26 years old. Domestic violence, those laws and those funding started in the 1970s. They're as old as I am. So how we create the new structure, this model of how to intervene with these very complex needs is very important. Other research questions are, who are the traffickers? How did they first make contact with the criminal justice system? What we know from our research is their first crime was not trafficking. It's so diverse, it's really hard. Some are murder, their first crime. Some are stealing a car. Some are assault on a school personnel. It's really diverse and difficult to figure out, except at that early age, that 17 and a half on average. Other things, how can they be found without a victim? How can law enforcement interact with traffickers without having a victim in front of them? Are there other techniques and tools? And how do we prevent that development of traffickers? How can sex trafficking be prevented with early warnings? How can trained community, healthcare, school personnel, hospitality prevent and recognize and intervene in trafficking situations? And then finally, the kind of the big question that we have is, how is sex trafficking allowed to happen? How does it happen in our communities? How do we, it won't happen in your neighborhood, right? You're not going to let it happen right in front of your house. Something's preventing it, but why is it happening in different parts of this city? Why is it allowed to happen? Public prostitution, which is, in our research, 9 out of 10 people who are exchanging sex for something of value, 9 out of 10 are being trafficked. They were either trafficked as a child or they're being trafficked now. So how do we allow that? What are things that we can do to change the environment, the mindset, the community? How do we get maybe communities where there is a lot of street prostitution? How do we get those communities activated to prevent that from happening, just like we would in the communities where we live? So we have some pretty amazing resources in our community and in your community here that talk about hospitality, how trafficking is related to, prostitution is sold in a couple of different places. One of them is in cars, one of them is in public places, one of them is in homes, and the rest is in hotels and motels, right? Places where people are renting. And so how do we create trainings and ongoing options for people to report what they see, help detect victimization, maybe prevent it from happening? Some of the research talks about when a person is transported into Las Vegas, do they know they're about to be trafficked? Do they, if you stop that car, your highway patrol stops that car, does that victim know what they're coming here to have happen? And our research actually shows no, they don't. They think they're coming to Las Vegas to party. And so how do you, if they're not asking for help, if they're not showing a flag, how do we help prevent that from moving forward? The last thing is this wonderful partner we have in Arizona called the Arizona Anti-Trafficking Network. This is one of the protocols that we help put together, and really things that are specific to hotel rooms, right? A garbage can full of condoms would be a flag, right? Some of them are very obvious, but other things, having a person have all of their belongings, none of their belongings, or it's complex, it's hidden, like your last speaker said, it's not all out there. We have to really look and dig and be really creative in our approaches. And that is my presentation for you. I'd like to introduce my co-presenters.
Thank you. My name is Jesse Kamal-Bernstein. I'm a lieutenant with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's Vice Unit. Just a couple of things to touch on. We talked about ways to intercept those traffickers before they find victims. And our police department has a program where we have a proactive investigations team. It's staffed by undercover female detectives, as well as other detectives that run the cases. And we act as somebody that would be a victim. We make arrests for pandering. We frequently purchase narcotics or other illegal things. So we have different charges, as was spoken to, about the poly offenders. But the goal of that is that we don't allow that trafficker to find a live victim and victimize them. So that is a continuing program. It's very active. We actually teach about that in many different places. We have a police department coming later next month to learn about our program. With respect to any of our responses, whether it's juvenile or adult trafficking victims, we always work with RISE, as well as many different members of our Southern Nevada Human Trafficking Task Force to make sure that they have supportive services and they have the ability to be supported by our community and by the members of those different organizations. With that, I'd like to pass to Jenna Strasser, who's our human trafficking manager and actually facilitates that group.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jenna Strasser. Like you said, I am the manager for the Southern Nevada Human Trafficking Task Force. I know he really spoke about the operations of the law enforcement piece. My piece is more of the education and outreach and direct victim service. So we work really closely with a lot of community members, including a lot of the resort properties that are here. I know a lot of them already have specific training that they do within their policies and procedures, but we work really closely and train all around the hotels, casino properties. We also do many businesses outside of that. We've done regulatory agencies. I know we've trained some of the culinary union. So our piece is really that prevention and education. Just to give you some numbers, last year we trained over 4,400 individuals in person and had 180 in-person trainings. So that doesn't account for any virtual trainings or any trainings that had maybe over 200 individuals online.
I wanted to say thank you to all three of you for the presentation. I presume that we'll have some questions kind of guided at different folk. But again, thank you for being here. We'll start off with Senator Rogich, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Doctor, for coming here with the presentation and the other individuals as well. I have a few questions with regard to the one chart that you have in the slide, and that's under what we know, and referring to the victim's age range starting at 11. And so your slide shows that identified sex trafficking victims range in age from 11 to 58. Can you break down the distribution and tell us approximately what proportion are minors?
Historically, in this community, we have about just a little over half are minors. Part of that is the policing approach. So you're going to have a different number. The data that we work with is law enforcement driven. So it's about the intervention by law enforcement will affect those numbers. So they're just a little over half of the data that we have collected in the last 12 years have been minors under 18. And the average age, I believe, is 14, pretty consistently throughout those 12 years.
And this is Jenna Strasser for the record. I think a lot of the majority of adults as well are the transitional age youth. So 18 to 25, under 30.
And then on the slide, you note that 20% of the identified victims have a history of special education. So how is history of special education defined in the data set that you're using? IEP, only 504?
Just so the question would be is if, oh, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
It literally is that question. Have they had a special education involvement? It's pretty simple. We're looking through case data. There may be a little bit of child welfare data in those case files, but it's pretty limited. That is a similar data set that we get from other places where we directly survey victims of trafficking. So in Hawaii, we have a number of research studies. In Arizona, we study our inmates and a bunch of different data streams, and that 20% is very consistent across the board.
But what about here in Las Vegas?
That is 20%.
Okay. And so for that 20% of trafficking victims with a special education history, do you have any data on how many have been suspended or expelled or otherwise removed from the regular school setting for behavioral reasons prior to the exploitation?
So we don't have school data on those. Remember, our data is just law enforcement specific.
But if they're 11 years old,
for the record, if I could, it's Jesse Como-Bernstein again. So we have started to try to ask regularly if someone does have an IEP, and or IEP, I apologize, to bolster that data, and that was a request that Professor had made to us. Sometimes it would be hard to give you specific numbers on that. Obviously, when our detectives are interviewing victims and finding information about them, part of that is to try to find a root cause of the issue that led to them being a victim and pairing them with the correct services. But without looking at individual cases, the information I could provide would probably be only anecdotal. I don't know if it'd be helpful.
So just following along that line, so when you pick up a child that is a minor in this and who is a victim of sex trafficking, are the schools aware of this, or the IEP teams? If you inquire and ask if they have Section 504 or an IEP background, are you notifying the school district?
Yes, and for the record, Jesse Como-Bernstein. Part of my juvenile trafficking team is that I have a Clark County School District police officer assigned, and there's also a notification system built in, the same that if we go to a domestic violence call, we have to fill out an online form which then notifies the school, and I believe that was a recent statute change in the last couple sessions, so that the school is aware of at least something going on, and that they may be missing things of that nature.
So you believe that there's sufficient coordination between the schools, law enforcement, and child welfare agencies when trafficking occurs?
Apologize. We additionally work with
and I'm sorry to interrupt. If I could just have you state your name.
So apologize. Jesse Como-Bernstein for the record. We work with the at-risk youth section for Clark County. They staff our cases. We meet with them regularly. We have a multidisciplinary team that sits down and goes over cases on a regular basis. It involves multiple different agencies as well as NGOs. I think to your point, it's incumbent upon us to continue to build those relationships and and make sure we do have good connections. I think we do right now with this system that we have, but it's because we continually really nurture those relationships and make sure that we have communication that's open. We send all of our juvenile information over to ARIES, at Risk Youth Section. Every single case that we get, they get a copy of that so that they are aware of what's going on with kids in the Valley.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Flanagan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. In the report, you noted the ages like 14 to 70 for traffickers. Wondering among the youth, are you noticing any signs of them organizing themselves? And I know that may sound strange, but I've heard stories and reports of girls going out as a group to where they've organized themselves for the sex trade. And so I'm wondering, how common is that?
For the record, this is Dr. Dominique Grosepowicz. We have seen in the data just in the last year a couple of adult traffickers who are female, and those were newer to the work that we're doing. Traditionally, they were working underneath a more traditional pimp trafficker. We have seen some female-led pimp prostitution situations of minors and adults, but it's still very small. We are not seeing in our research female-led groups of girls exchanging sex as sort of a sex work situation. We're not seeing it in this region, and we're not seeing it in other places as well. What we're finding is that when a person is in distress, or there are things that they want or things that they need, rarely do they think about selling sex as an option. Usually someone has to introduce that option. Now, many of the kids that we've worked with in the data that we have here come from communities where their mom was also being trafficked, their grandmother, right? We see lots of intergenerational cases. And so it might be present in their community, but we do not have cases that are built where the young person is acting alone or with another couple of girls in the research that we've done, and that goes from 2011 through 2025 for minors.
For the record, Jesse Colbernstein, and just to that point, we usually see there's, like she said, some involvement that started that and gave someone, whether they were a victim, their family was a victim, but I don't remember any since I've been here where we've had someone independently decide as a child to go work in commercial sex.
Remember, any follow-up? No? Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you again for the work you do and for joining us today. We do appreciate your time. Next, I'd like to invite the Cupcake Girls, Ash Miller, the Interim Executive Director. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Whenever you're ready. No, you're perfect there. The microphone, there's a button right underneath it that turns it green, and that's when it's good to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your time today. My name is Ash Miller, representing the Cupcake Girls. We're a nonprofit that has been around in Nevada and Oregon since 2011. We are an anti-trafficking and pro-sex workers' rights organization. So we do operate in a very unique sphere, not just in Nevada, not just in Oregon, but in the United States as a whole. I am here today, however, to focus on Nevada. So we believe in a Nevada where every person is safe from exploitation. As we study things, we must ensure that anti-trafficking efforts are precise, rights-based, and do not inadvertently harm the very people we aim to protect, including consensual sex workers. We are here today because Nevada's hospitality industry is the gold standard of the world, but being a leader in hospitality means being a leader in safety. Currently, exploitation, specifically human trafficking, often intersects with our tourism infrastructure. However, to effectively solve this, we must be precise. Anti-trafficking efforts in the past have often cast too wide a net, conflating consensual adult sex work with the crime of trafficking. When we do this and the efforts presented lump everything into one category, we prevent trafficking survivors from seeking help. We further traumatize marginalized demographics, and we make the costs far outweigh the benefits of asking for assistance. Today, I'm presenting a framework for legislative action in 2026 that prioritizes harm reduction, labor rights, and the clear distinction between coercion and consent. Our world-class hospitality infrastructure should be a leader in safety, not surveillance. Currently, 75% of survivors report being moved through hotels. However, broad red flag training can lead to the profiling of consensual workers, pushing them into more dangerous, isolated environments. We need a nuanced approach, and we need input from trafficking survivors, as well as the input from sex worker rights groups, the recent United Brothel Workers Union, and anti-trafficking organizations together. Many current red flag lists include things like using cash, having multiple cell phones, or frequent guests. When hotel staff are trained to report these signs, it leads to the unnecessary eviction or policing of people and makes the net wide enough that it captures folks not involved in trafficking from any angle. When we declare red flags as the best we can do, we further isolate survivors and create even more dangerous situations. Consensual workers and trafficking survivors are forced together to work in darker corners, in vehicles, and in more dangerous street-based environments where they are at a 40% higher risk of violence. Displacement is not a victory. It is an escalation of risk. True trafficking is defined by force, fraud, and coercion, something that the red flag models often miss. Current voluntary trainings are insufficient and often lack the perspective of those most impacted. The training must be clearly distinguished between consensual adult labor and the crime of trafficking. By focusing on indicators of physical restraint and document confiscation rather than suspicious guests, we more effectively target traffickers while respecting the rights and privacy of all individuals. I have for your consideration today 3 actionable policy shifts that the Cupcake Girls recommend. Number 1, mandatory rights-informed training. We propose a state mandate for hospitality training that is co-developed by anti-trafficking experts and sex worker rights advocates together. This ensures that staff can identify genuine distress without becoming morale police who profile guests based on appearance. Number 2, evidence-based resource distribution. Instead of only posting the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which, by the way, many survivors and workers do not trust because it does put them at further risk for potential prosecution against themselves while they are actively seeking help. We recommend also posting resources for community-based support, legal aid, and harm reduction organizations. We need to build a bridge of trust, not a pipeline to deportation or arrest. Number 3, civil immunity for reporters of actual distress. We want to protect employees who report clear signs of physical violence or forced confinement, but we must also ensure that there are penalties for bad faith reporting that targets individuals based on discrimination or bias against sex work, especially in Nevada, where we have multiple forms of legalized sex work at play all the time. Since the passage of TVPRA, hotels face multi-million-dollar lawsuits for willful blindness. But willful blindness is not solved by over-policing. It is solved by having clear professional protocols. A hotel that respects the rights of workers while strictly banning coercion is a safer, more legally sound business. Frontline staff, from housekeepers and front desk clerks to security staff, are often traumatized themselves when they are forced to act as de facto law enforcement. By giving them a clear rights-based framework, we empower them to help people in distress without the moral confusion of policing guests. We recommend that back-of-house signage provides resources for all forms of labor exploitation and community-based support services, not just law enforcement hotlines that often create more pathways of confusion rather than support. In 2026, Nevada has a choice. We can continue a zero tolerance policy that historically has failed to stop trafficking while hurting the most vulnerable, or we can lead the nation with a rights-based safety model. We ask this committee to support legislation that mandates inclusive, survivor-informed training and provides funding for community-led outreach programs that operate outside of the criminal justice system. We also ask that we remind that safety and rights are not a zero-sum game. We can end trafficking while protecting the agency of those who work legally in the sex industry. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Members, any questions at this time? Assemblymember Cole, please.
Sorry. I think I'm semi-famous for asking fairly dumb questions. Is there a form of sex work that would be legal in the resort corridor? I didn't think there was, but maybe I'm wrong. Thank you.
There's some really gray area at this point in time. On the record, Ash Miller from the Cupcake Girls. Caught myself on that one, thanks. Some of the gray area that we are seeing in the current state of the sex industry are platforms like OnlyFans, platforms like ManyVids, where in order for any worker to actually be on that platform, they are submitting a W-9. They are paying their taxes. They are having to report all of that income and being taxed fairly on the work that they're doing. That's also an example of sex work that doesn't necessarily involve other individuals other than the content creator themselves. So like we have some really murky gray area territories that kind of are very slippery slopes around, is this a version of illegal while you're still paying taxes and you're still paying into the system? Or are you actually working a job the way you would at a McDonald's, at a dental office, perhaps in housekeeping or at a front desk, where you're still an active citizen performing a job that is recognized outside in many other circumstances, but suddenly it becomes very murky based on the specifics of what you're doing. Yep.
Members, any additional questions? Senator Rogich, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I just want a little clarity on what you just stated. To be clear, prostitution is prohibited within the resort corridor in the city of Las Vegas.
Ash Miller from the Cupcake Girls. It is indeed. We are speaking to the broader state of Nevada as well, though, where we do have our brothels located outside of Clark County, which are a prime example of legalized sex work within the state.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to working alongside of you as well. Thank you. And next, we will have both Captain Dennis and Martinez, please join us for a presentation on behalf of Las Vegas Metro.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Captain Dennis had to leave. He had a scheduling conflict. So I'll go ahead and do my best and try to present. Are you guys ready, sir? So again, my name is Josh Martinez, Captain with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. We're here to provide you a brief overview of our Convention Center Area Command. That is the primary area command that is responsible for policing the Las Vegas Strip and the resort corridor. That corridor consists of, as everybody knows, the world famous Las Vegas Strip, but part of their responsibility also extends west on Tropicana to the other hotels that exist there, and then also to the Virgin Hotel on the east side of the Strip, and then over on Flamingo as well to the resorts that are over on that end as well. So they have a large geographical area of responsibility. That also includes the T-Mobile sporting event as well as Allegiant Stadium. So we've worked for many, many years, as everybody knows, with the resort industry, as well as other businesses that operate within the resort corridor. The Safe Village initiative that Captain Dennis and his team have implemented is a targeted crime reduction strategy implemented within their area command. And the initiative is data-driven. So we look at the statistics and see where the crime is occurring, looking at just also, we have daily briefings, as everybody knows, with our officers, they observe certain things that are taking place within their area command. So we take the data as well as the real-time feedback that they're receiving during their briefings to increase patrol presence, targeted enforcement operations, strong partnerships with resort security teams, and strategic use of technology to deter and investigate crime. Collaborative efforts take place with our resort partners. LVMPD works closely with resort security teams to prevent violent crime both inside resort properties and in surrounding areas such as parking garages and public walkways. Resorts coordinate with LVMPD to deploy additional resources during large events and high traffic tourism periods. These partnerships allow rapid communication, coordinated response, and proactive crime prevention strategies. We participate in the security chiefs meetings that take place to discuss current things that are occurring within the resort corridor. And as I said, we work on strategies with them and partner on a daily basis, on a 24-hour basis as well, as we know the place never closes. Technology used to prevent and investigate crimes, as everybody has probably seen in the media, Las Vegas Metro, the sheriff's goal is to become the most advanced technological police agency in the country. We have surveillance and crime cameras that tie directly into our Fusion Watch Center. So it's a real-time policing effort that we can get data out there to the officers, but also the cameras to monitor crime that's taking place. For instance, we have license plate readers, so we're able to identify vehicles that have been used in robbery crimes or stolen vehicles that are picked up, and then we deploy our resources, as well as we have drone program now that will also assist our officers out there and provide overwatch, which gives us a better tactical advantage to keep our officers safe. Not only keep our officers safe, but the community. Just a few details on the cameras is that they monitor activity in real time, deter criminal activity through visible surveillance, and quickly identify, and we're able to respond to incidents. I already covered the collaboration and resort security that we do on a monthly and quarterly basis. We'll also work with our crime prevention specialists to help provide tips to the businesses on how to better protect themselves. So we have a crime prevention specialist program in all of our area commands and department-wide that'll go out there. They'll do a site assessment, talk about lighting, they'll talk about shrubbery, they'll talk about education, on how to make it safer for the resort employees as well as the tourists that visit our areas as well. And then just to highlight a few things that have taken place, we just want to thank the legislative body for extending the look back period in regards to the trespass. That was a 2025 session. That'll help us deal with repeat offenders, authorizing the implementation of a resort corridor court if the county decides to do so. We appreciate that. And then we also appreciate just the overall effort and the collaboration that each of you have reached out to us for. And just to provide a few details on crime numbers, to provide you some data, the Convention Center Area Command last year in regards to violent crime, we had 91 incidences in 2025. Currently, right now, year to date, we're at 63 incidences, so we're already down 30.8%. And our homicide offenses, we have for 2026, we have one homicide that's occurred in year to date, 0 in 2025. So give or take, we're at a even number there. And then property crimes, year to date in 2025, we had 1,066 incidences and 765 so far in 2026. So we have a 28.2% year-to-date decline. I'd be happy, Chair, to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you for.
Yes, thank you. And if you could please email the data points also so that the committee members can have those.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And we'll start off with Senator Lang.
Thank you. I want to go back to the question I asked earlier about the amount of crime that you see on the Strip as opposed to off Strip at the casinos?
Just speaking from my experience, I'm not out there on a regular basis, so I had the captain come today. The crime that we see on the Strip, it's declined significantly. As I provided you some year-to-date numbers, I also have some numbers, 2024 comparison to 2025 comparison, and violent crime was down 11.3% within the Convention Center Area Command, and our homicides had decreased from 7 in 2024 to 4 in 2025, which was a 42.9% reduction. So we're seeing a significant decrease. The policing methods that we've put in place, but we also are seeing, as you heard me testify or may have heard, we're seeing a decrease across the department. So what we're seeing on the Strip is what we're seeing in our neighborhoods as well. The sheriff just gave his state of the department address, and he was able to highlight those decreases that we're seeing around the department.
Thank you. And I think some of the legislation we have passed has been able to help facilitate that decrease. But if you could put a percentage on the crime on the Strip as opposed to off Strip, would you be able to quantify that?
Senator Lang, yes, Metro would be able to quantify that. And as soon as I get back to the office, I will work on that data. I currently only have the Convention Center Area Command data in front of me, but I'll also be able to provide you the department end of year numbers from last year, which are compared to the previous year.
Thank you. And with those categories that you would be able to get are the same as you did for the Strip, the Convention Center area?
Yes, our data reporting is the same that we capture, and that's the federal standard that we report to the state and they report to the federal government.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate all that you do.
Thank you, Senator.
Assemblymember Bacchus, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just had a clarification because you were saying certain things and I got hung up on the data, and thank you, Captain Martinez, for your presentation. When you were saying, for example, the incidents in 2025, let's just use, you had, like for the homicide numbers, you threw out like 0 or 1 for 2025, and then you threw out 0 or 1 for 2026. And then you were talking about the differences of things decreasing. That one was an example of it being the same. Are you looking at like a year to date when you say 2026 because the numbers just didn't drive, like for property crimes, it was 2025, we had 1,066. And then you said for 2026 was 765, which that would be a decrease of 28.2%. But in 2026, we're only in the month of March. So are we just looking at a year to date? Is that what you were looking at?
Assemblymember Bacchus, I am looking at a year to date, and the week ending was 3/8 of 2026. So the number of total property crimes for the Convention Center Area Command is 765 for 2026. In 2025, we had 1,066 events reported for property crimes. So year to date, as of 3/8 of 2026, we are down 28.2%.
Captain Martin, thank you so much for that. Because when I was looking at it, I was like, wait a minute, are we talking actual calendar years or year to date? So I appreciate it.
And I could just follow up with that, Assembly Member, as well, and give you the year to date for 2025 versus the year to date in 2024 as well. I have that in front of me if you would like.
Sure, that's okay with the chair.
So Josh Martinez, again, for the record, property crimes ending 12/31 of 2025 for year to date of 2025 was 5,372 property crimes. Year to date in 2024 was 6,172. We saw a reduction of 13%.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none from the members, I have a few. I'll start off in the 3 buckets that I listed. So I'll start off with human trafficking. Through the human trafficking lens, do we have any data points of calls that relate to specifically human trafficking? What are those data points? What does that look like?
Chair Flores, Josh Martinez, for the record, I don't want to attempt to answer those. That's why I have our Southern Nevada Human Trafficking Task Force Lieutenant and our civilian employee here. And if you want them to come forward to answer that, that would be best, because I don't want to give anything that contradicts, since that data collection is a little bit different.
Sure. And before I have them come up, then what I'll do is maybe get into the other two buckets on specifically weapons. When we talk about guns, what data points do we have on the amount of guns that have been recovered off the strip, for example, and or gaming properties?
All right, Josh Martinez, for the record, I'll give you some data points in regards to firearms. They're crime indicators that we list on our annual LVMPD statistics, and they're broken down into three categories of shooting victims, firearms cases, and domestic violence in the Convention Center Area Command. So shooting victims, we had 7 shooting victims in 2025 compared to 11 shooting victims in 2024. That was a 36.4% decrease. Firearms related cases that we had were 234 in 2025 versus 318 in 2024, which was a reduction of 26.4%. Domestic violence related cases in year 2025 were 1,425. Year to date in 2024, we had 1,316. We saw an 8.3% increase in domestic violence crimes in those particular crime categories. And the shooting victims and firearms would be specific to your question of the firearms related cases.
Understood. And then as it pertains to the illegal substances, drugs, do we have data points on arrests related to drugs, whether it be on the trafficking, possession with intent to sell versus personal use? Do we have data specifically on that?
Chair Josh Martinez, again, for the record, looking at my statistical report, I'm not seeing anything related to drug offenses on this one, but I will be able to get that data for you and the committee. That is something that we should have.
Thank you. And maybe our gaming partners will know the answer to this question better than yourself, but I'll still ask you in case you have some data points on it. Do you have the chain of command in terms of the reporting mechanism? In other words, was it an employee who identified the issue, who then reported that to their local chain of command, whether it's security, head of security, or do they report directly to law enforcement, or do we have a hybrid of that? Do we know?
Chair Josh Martinez, when you're asking to just be a little more specific, I know in talking to our counterparts, we were looking for housekeeping. We had a call with some folks that were looking for particular information related to housekeeping. And in regards to that, we don't keep that particular data set. If a housekeeper was a victim of a crime, we take the report as the crime. So we can't delineate and say this crime is related to a housekeeper. But as far as the chain of custody too, that's where you start to talk about security, resort security, or security for folks within the resort corridor. We can't answer what they keep or don't keep. They would have to answer that for themselves. In regards to particular information, if you break down the data set a little bit more, I might be able to assist with that if we became a little more specific.
Great. And I was just curious to know, I guess ultimately, because we're talking about particularly the folk that are even in this room now, who are there and initially making that contact, whatever it may be, right? Whether they identify a weapon, they see drugs, and or they suspect that somebody's a victim of human trafficking. I'm just curious to know if they're at times reaching out directly to law enforcement, or if that goes up the chain of command to somebody else internally, who then makes the phone call to law enforcement. And the reason I'm curious to know that is just I want to know if there's going to be how feasible it will be for us to get data to understand when you're taking that initial report, are you interviewing a lot of these folk who are on the front lines kind of having this conversation initially, or is it mostly being relayed by the head of security or somebody else?
Well, Josh Martinez, for the record, as you know, with any crime being reported, that could come from various sources. It could come from security. It could come from a patron on a property. It could come from an employee that's working that's a victim of a crime, and they could call directly. I don't know what their reporting mechanism through their chain of command is, but we could look at our data dispatch, I believe, and get some data to say who the person reporting, we refer to as the PR, person reporting the crime would be. I'm not sure if we'd be able to break that down, but it's just like crimes in the neighborhood or anywhere else, anybody could call. It could be security, it could be a citizen, it could be the victim of a crime. Just to use an example, because we do know there's some high profile events that have occurred within the resort corridor, one in particular that was streamed on social media. That's something that's going to come to police attention through various means, just because of what is taking place. It's a crime in progress. And so it could be 3, 4, 5, or 6 different callers.
Great. And then if we could have somebody join us from your task force on human trafficking. I'm just curious to know on the numbers, do we have specific data points for each year on human trafficking related arrests, charges, et cetera?
For the record, Jesse Colbernstein. So we don't code the call on the incoming side as a human trafficking type call. So it's difficult to tell you someone called in for a human trafficking concern X amount of times a year. What we do keep is data on how many cases my unit works and how many arrests we make. So we would have that information. We don't have it broken down for the resort corridor right now. If there's something specific you're looking for, we could see if we can pull that data, but we don't have anything specific to the resort corridor at this point.
Please, and thank you. I guess that would be the request for the committee, that we try to identify how many arrests, charges, and or calls. I'm assuming there may be instances where they suspect somebody being a victim, but then by the time law enforcement shows up, the victim is no longer there, and or they're not cooperating always with the information that you're asking for. But if you could provide some information as to anything involving human trafficking, and it could be on I don't want to pretend that there is an exhaustive list, but I'm assuming that there's the arrest of solicitation. I'm assuming that there's at times interactions with who is suspected to be maybe a pimp or somebody who is trying to offer services and or someone trying to take you off site and provide you access to XYZ. So I'm just curious to know if you could help break that down. I know that we're not going to have very concrete data because it involves you going into multiple different types of charges and then trying to put them together, but that would be helpful to the committee, particularly for what we're discussing today.
And for the record, Jessica Colbernstein, so just 2 points on that. The physical arrest may occur at an offsite location. So there's something to keep in mind. If we start an investigation which begins at a resort property, that arrest may occur at a different location. Secondly to that, our victims have the choice whether or not they want law enforcement contact initially or at any point. You know, we meet our victims wherever they are. They're the victim. They get to decide how they want to proceed. So they may choose to interact with a provider, then 2-3 years down the road decide they want to speak with a police officer or vice versa. But we allow them to make that decision. So that'll also, just so you're aware, that'll kind of make it a little more difficult as well to capture that true picture. But we'll look through our data and see if there's something that would be helpful to what you're trying to get at.
Thank you for that. Members, I just want to make sure that in this line of questioning and or back and forth that new questions haven't arisen from anybody. And I also wanted to make it abundantly clear that we obviously don't have all our gaming properties in Northern Nevada. Nothing that we're discussing here today is somehow uniquely only impacting Southern Nevada. This is a state of Nevada concern and issue. Obviously, we had the opportunity from the folks who agreed to participate today, who are namely from Southern Nevada, but that is not to suggest that this is a conversation that only matters in Southern Nevada. It's obviously something we care about in the entire state. And as these conversations continue to move forward, I want to make sure that we reach out to partners and bring in folk from the entire state. And I just wanted to make that clear. Again, I appreciate the feedback. And yeah, anything you can provide would be very helpful to the committee in terms of data as we're trying to move this conversation forward. Thank you. All right, members, I appreciate all of you. We will continue to move forward. Next, we're going to be inviting Jessica Kay, licensed master social worker. Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jessica Kay. I am a Nevada resident. I'm a survivor of human trafficking and domestic violence. And I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. I have been working and advising the Culinary Union on trafficking as they prepared for this meeting today. I come to you with both lived experience and professional experience working with complex trauma, human trafficking, and exploitation. Trafficking does not operate in the shadows. I think a lot of people think that's where it is. It's hidden in the dark alleyways, or it's in the rescue operations. But it really operates in plain sight here in Nevada. It operates in our systems. It operates in industries that were not designed to identify forced fraud and coercion. Nevada's economy creates unique vulnerabilities. When people think about Nevada, they think about escort services, they think about strip clubs, and they think about legalized prostitution. In that kind of environment, commercial sex can start to feel normalized. But when something becomes normalized, it can also become easier to hide in plain sight. Trafficking shows up in our hotels and our casinos. It shows up in our strip clubs. It shows up in escort services. It shows up in brothels. It shows up during major conventions and sporting events. It shows up in runaway and homeless youth engaging in survival sex. And it literally shows up in every part of our community. I was trafficked here in Las Vegas, and like many victims, it did not start with force. It started with trust, started with love, started with grooming, manipulation, and someone who gained my trust. Over time, that relationship turned into complete control. One day, he drove me to a major off-strip casino, and he told me we were going to meet somebody who had a job for me. When we pulled up, a girl opened the car door. He put his foot on my upper thigh and kicked me out of the car. Within minutes, I was being forced to sell my body. That night, it took me over 10 hours to meet my quota. Over the next 18 months, I was sold to strangers in hotels and casinos across the city. I was advertised through escort services and online platforms. I was sold by pimps, escort services, and through referrals from bellmen, security guards, concierge, and managers, and others working inside the hospitality industry. Control was consent. We were not allowed to eat until we met our quota. We were threatened, beaten, isolated, and held at gunpoint in order to keep us compliant. And the violence didn't just come from traffickers. Buyers often believed that once money was exchanged, they owned us. I was robbed, beaten, and raped by buyers who believed they had purchased the right to do whatever they wanted. The harsh reality is, much of this was happening in places where thousands of people were walking by every day, often believing they were seeing simply prostitution. From both my lived experience and my clinical work with victims, I can tell you this: trafficking rarely looks like chains. It looks like manipulation, it looks like debt, looks like threats, looks like isolation, it looks like violence, and it looks like prostitution. Social media and online platforms have made it easier to recruit, advertise, and move victims. But the underlying dynamics of exploitation remain the same. And I know that not just from my personal experience, but from years of working directly with victims. Trafficking looks like someone believing they are choosing something, when in reality, their options have been systematically stripped away. And this distinction matters when we are speaking about data. Right now in Nevada, our data landscape is very fragmented. Law enforcement, nonprofit organizations, healthcare systems, unions, and hospitality properties are not operating from a unified reporting framework. Arrest data is often treated as prevalence data, but arrest numbers do not reflect the scope of exploitation. Many victims are misclassified as engaging in prostitution, as runaway youth, or as domestic violence victims without recognition of the trafficking dynamics. Survivors often don't self-identify for years. It actually took me 5 years, and I didn't self-identify until I was in a class at USC getting my master's degree, and the topic came up, and I had a breakdown and a breakthrough in class. So it took me over 5 years to self-identify. That fear, it comes from fear of retaliation, immigration concerns, shame, and trauma can all contribute to underreporting. We also lack centralized, real-time statewide tracking of trafficking indicators. There's no consistent system that measures patterns of coercion within the hospitality environments. We do not systematically track spikes during major tourism events. We do not meaningfully capture what frontline workers are seeing. And that is important because housekeeping staff, food service workers, security personnel, and union members are often the first to see the red flags. Many properties have implemented trafficking training, and that is a step forward. But much of this training is compliant-based rather than trauma-informed. Workers are often told to look for suspicious behavior, but not trained to recognize coercion indicators such as controlling third parties, restricted movement, excessive monitoring, or signs of psychological distress. Even when workers see red flags, there are gaps. There may not be anonymous reporting channels. There may be fear of retaliation. There may be uncertainty about what happens after a report is made. And in many cases, there is no clearly defined survivor-centered response protocol once exploitation is identified. Survivors must be a part of developing those guidelines because they understand the risk victims face and how systems can respond without causing additional harm. On the government side, our response remains largely reactive. We respond after harm has escalated. Funding is often short-term and crisis-based. High complexity survivors with severe trauma diagnoses often fall through service gaps. because our systems are not designed for long-term stabilization. We have built systems to respond to crisis. We have not built systems robust enough to prevent force, fraud, and coercion. How should we use the data that comes out of this committee? First, we must use it to identify structural vulnerabilities, not just individual offenders. If we only count arrests, we will miss patterns. Second, we should map trafficking indicators around major tourism events and seasonal spikes. Third, we should develop standardized trafficking indicators across hospitality properties so that reporting is consistent and measurable. Fourth, we must include worker-reported data. Union members and frontline staff should have protected anonymous pathways to report concerns without fear of job loss or retaliation. Fifth, we need to track exit barriers. Housing instability, lack of trauma-informed care, lack of employment pathways, and child gaps all directly impact whether someone can safely leave exploitation. Because the reality is, a victim can't leave exploitation if there's nowhere safe to go. Right now in Las Vegas, there are limited options for child victims, especially those that are not in state custody. And there are no housing options for adult victims. If we want people to exit exploitation, we must build the infrastructure to make that possible. Data should not just help us understand the problem, it should guide where we invest in transformational services, safe housing, long-term trauma-informed care, and pathways to stability so survivors can rebuild their lives. Solutions do not have to be extreme, but they need to be strategic. We can implement mandatory trauma-informed training developed with survivor input. We can create anonymous reporting systems specifically for hospitality workers. We can develop event-based trafficking mitigation plans for major conventions and sporting events. We can establish a statewide hospitality trafficking indicator protocol. And we can invest in long-term, high-complexity survivor care rather than short-term crisis response. Collecting data within the hotel industry is an important step. It will help us better understand the scope of trafficking in Nevada, but that data must be connected to a broader system. Nonprofits, healthcare providers, law enforcement, and other agencies are all encountering victims in different places. If we want a real picture of the problem and real solutions, we need coordinated data collection across all those systems guided by survivor insight. I'm here not only as a survivor, I'm here as a clinician and a Nevada resident. And I believe that this state can lead in the prevention area. Trafficking thrives where systems are fragmented. If we align data, policy, worker protections, and survivor-informed solutions, Nevada has the opportunity to reduce vulnerability at a structural level. The goal is to not simply to count victims. Data help us see the problem. Survivor leadership helps us solve it. And success means less violence, less trafficking and exploitation, and a safer community. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your willingness to join us today. Members, any questions? Not all at once, please. I guess broadening the conversation back to the folk that we want to make sure that we have a safe work environment. We want to make sure that we continue to have the gold standard in Nevada. There's been a pattern almost every legislative session that we're trying to do something, whether ensuring that we have a police corridor, in the resort corridor, we have more law enforcement, or that we're putting money and resources so that they can do their job adequately, or whether it is this past legislative session, we just had talks about increasing certain convictions being penalized differently, whether it's the specialty court, et cetera. So the state clearly in the legislature has made it abundantly clear that this is our obligation and responsibility, and everybody's working collaboratively in that way. The question is, how do we utilize this committee to really focus a little bit of the light on the issues that we're trying to address while also focusing on worker protections. Because ultimately our concern is understanding the data, but the concern is that we may not understand the data because it doesn't exist, right? So it's not just getting data, but does it even exist? And then the second phase of that question is, if it doesn't exist, what do we do to obtain it? But then the more important part of that, the data, is to get us to how do we protect the workers, right? How do we make sure that if this is in reality happening, it's not reported, we don't have the real numbers. How do we achieve that objective too? So, and any feedback or input on us, on maybe even perhaps on ways of obtaining this information, right? Because anecdotally, we could have people who are in this industry come in and provide feedback, but how, you know, anything you could help provide us as a almost like homework to the committee would be helpful, right? In your lane.
I don't necessarily have an answer to that question. That's a really, really broad question. Obviously, this is part of the reason why I would say like data collection is important, right? We really need to understand the full scope and not this fragmented data that we have, right? No matter which area or arena you're working in, nobody has the exact data, right? So child welfare has one numbers, agencies have other numbers, right? There's a lot of smoke and mirrors sometimes. So one, we need a better data collection, right? But, and this is my opinion as a survivor wholeheartedly, one, we have legalized prostitution. Legalized prostitution fuels the sex trade, right? People come out here to purchase sex. So if we really want to make Nevada safer, specifically the hotels and casinos, we need to start going after demand and we need to start prosecuting more traffickers. Now, obviously that's a big goal, right? But we have to do more. And we don't even have pathways right now to get people out of trafficking and exploitation. Our housing for adult victims have closed down within the last 6 months. We have 0 places to put an adult victim safely. So we have a lot of work to do. I don't have all the answers, but I would also say that we really, really need to center survivor leadership at the front of this conversation, right? So many survivors across the country have been trafficked through this city, and our experiences matter if we are going to create meaningful change in this community.
Thank you. And I think we've heard that now multiple times, in ensuring that if we care about survivors, that survivors are present in the conversation. And we take that very seriously. Thank you for your presentation. With that, thank you again. We'd like to invite the Nevada, what am I looking for? Yeah, we're going to, what was that? The Health District, correct? Yeah, we're going to go ahead and invite the Nevada Southern Health District, if you could please join us. And thank you for joining us. Welcome whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Jessica Johnson, Health Education Supervisor at Southern Nevada Health District. We want to thank you, Senator Flores, and this committee for inviting the Health District to come and present today to discuss the Southern Nevada Health District's work on drug overdose, surveillance, and prevention efforts. My colleague, Brandon DeLisi, and I will both be covering this presentation back and forth today, and we just thank you for your time and attention.
For the record, my name is Brandon DeLisi, Senior Epidemiologist at the Southern Nevada Health District. So I will be presenting Clark County data and health district initiatives regarding the overdose epidemic. So first I'll talk about the overdose mortality for both Clark County residents and non-residents. and then move into what the health district is doing to help reduce overdose deaths. So let's move into the Clark County data and see how it compares with the US as a whole. So what you're looking at are age-adjusted death rates. Clark County is at the top of the figure, and then the US is at the bottom. The majority of fatal drug overdoses in Clark County and across the US are unintentional. So as you can see, Clark County saw a sharp increase in overdose deaths starting in 2020, followed by a sharp decrease in 2025. While this mirrors national patterns, there are local variations in timing. Specifically, Clark County tends to lag behind the US opioid trends by about a year. So this is something that we've observed and pay close attention to. So this slide also uses age-adjusted death rates to show trends by drug class among residents from 2018 to 2025. Since it's kind of hard to see from a distance, the orange line is all opioids, the green is synthetic opioids, which includes fentanyl, and the pink represents psychostimulants, primarily methamphetamine. So what really jumps out here is how steeply synthetic opioids and psychostimulants increased through 2024, followed by a clear drop in 2025. For the past 5 years, our mortality data has consistently shown that synthetic opioids and psychostimulants drive the majority of overdose deaths in Clark County. That's still true in 2025, but the magnitude of those deaths is declining, which is an important shift. So to put that in a single number, we saw a 23% decrease in overdose deaths across all substances from 2024 to 2025. That's a meaningful change. And so let's move into resident versus non-resident data. So it's important to define what I mean by non-resident. So this is a broad category that represents the 40 million tourists we see annually, as well as students at UNLV or CSN who maintain out-of-state residency, military personnel at Nellis Air Force Base, seasonal workers in hospitality and construction, even populations experiencing homelessness or undocumented individuals who may not have an established Nevada residency. And so with these data, we are moving from rates to counts. So we will only be looking at the numerator, so only the number of people dying. So we do this because we don't always have a reliable denominator for the transient populations like tourists or seasonal workers. So looking at all drug overdose deaths among Clark County residents versus non-residents from 2018 to 2025, what we are seeing, residents have more deaths than non-residents, and there is a statistically significant correlation and a very strong correlation as well. So as resident overdose deaths increase year over year, non-resident deaths rose almost in lockstep. And again, this is for all fatal drug overdoses. So when we isolate deaths involving synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl, we see residents have more deaths than non-residents, and that is significant. So there's a very strong correlation between residents and non-residents. Fentanyl deaths are hitting both groups nearly identically in terms of trend direction and timing. For psychostimulants, so like the previous two, we see residents have more deaths than non-residents, and there's a significant and strong correlation between both groups. The big takeaway for these past 3 slides, across these major drug categories, resident and non-resident deaths have significant correlations, which means they are moving together very strongly. The forces driving these overdose deaths in Clark County, namely drug supply changes, are affecting both populations simultaneously rather than being unique to one group. So this brings us to the resident to non-resident overdose death ratios, and very interesting data here. In 2018, residents died at 5.4 times the rate of non-residents for all drug overdoses. By 2025, that ratio dropped to 3.4 to 1. So the narrowing ratios across all 3 categories, all overdose, synthetic, which includes fentanyl, and psychostimulants, which include methamphetamine, tell us something important. What was once primarily a resident problem is increasingly affecting visitors and non-residents too. So to visualize where these incidents are occurring, this heat map shows resident overdose deaths from 2018 to 2025. So as you can see, the densest areas of fatal overdose among our residents are heavily concentrated in the center of the valley and downtown. And so when we move to our non-resident heat map, the geographic footprint shifts quite a bit. The highest density of non-resident overdose deaths is clustered directly over the Las Vegas Strip and downtown, reflecting where our visitors stay and unfortunately experience these fatal overdoses. This slide provides a breakdown of drug overdose deaths among non-Clark County residents by race, ethnicity, and sex from 2018 to 2025. Non-residents who were white, as well as non-residents who were male, had the highest counts of overdose deaths by a wide margin. And given the geographic concentration of non-resident overdoses, what we just saw, our interventions have to meet people where they physically are. So this leads us to our naloxone distribution efforts. Casinos see thousands of visitors daily, which inherently increases the likelihood of overdose. So that's just how it goes. As part of the health district's broader strategy to expand community naloxone access, we have made casinos key distribution partners. Since 2018, the health district has distributed 7,753 doses of naloxone to most of the casinos along the Las Vegas Strip and throughout Clark County. Alongside that distribution, we have trained 405 casino staff members in overdose response and naloxone administration. To highlight just our 2025 naloxone data, we distributed over 212,000 doses of naloxone to entities across Clark County, and 1,968 doses were distributed specifically to casinos in 2025. And this is a map I created using the health district's naloxone distribution data, but only for casinos. As you can see, we have canvassed the Strip and downtown areas very, very well. I've said this earlier, but we have distributed to most of the casinos that are located downtown and on the Strip. Using the health district naloxone post-administration survey that I created and I collect, casinos reported 105 naloxone administrations, resulting in successful overdose reversal, which is amazing to see. 3 potential reversals were reported, 14 administrations with unknown outcomes. So with these data, we received these post-administration survey reports, but they account for less than 1% of the distributed naloxone, which indicates substantial underreporting of naloxone use. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jessica Johnson.
Good afternoon, Jessica Johnson for the record. So what is the health district and our partners doing to reduce overdose morbidity and mortality in Clark County? You saw Brandon's data earlier that we've seen some reductions between 2024 and 2025. The brief answer to that is we're doing a lot of things in partnership with a lot of community partners. This slide here highlights our 4 major funding sources that help support the health district's efforts across the community. They are all federal funding sources that we applied for and received to help do this work, both through our teams at the health district, but also with our community partners. The items underlined on this slide indicate direct naloxone, and in case that term is unfamiliar to you, that's the opioid overdose reversal medication brand name Narcan, just to make sure folks know what we're getting out in the community here. So these underlined items reflect direct distribution to individuals at risk of overdose, their friends, family, and community partners. I won't spend the remainder of the time talking about all of these in depth, but would be happy to take questions on any of these projects. We're very proud of them. A few areas to highlight. You'll see on the far right under our FR CARA efforts, we have over 400 community agencies distributing naloxone through their networks. This includes many of the groups that you've heard presentations from today: RISE, Cupcake Girls, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, to casinos, as Brandon mentioned earlier, and doing outreaches with many of these groups, including the Convention Center and RISE teams, to help really broaden our efforts in the community, just to name a few. We also have led the nation in our works to distribute naloxone and other overdose prevention supports via vending machines or kiosks. These efforts really highlight low barrier access to naloxone has been a big priority over the last couple of years. So this includes implementing mail-based distribution for naloxone access, canvassing efforts where we use our data to drive action in neighborhoods that might be hotspots with our partners, Foundation for Recovery, who go door to door and ask folks if they're aware of overdoses in their neighborhood and if they'd be interested in having naloxone, and educate people on how to use that. Just like a fire extinguisher, something to have in your home that you hope you never need, but you're very glad you have it if you need it. We've worked, as I mentioned, with vending machines, our Clark County libraries, kiosks, and outreach, many ways in the community that we're working to get naloxone out there. That's not the only thing that is on this slide or that we do. Our team does linkage and outreach in Clark County Detention Center, out in hotspot areas in the community. We work collaboratively with UMC and the Valley Health System to both have naloxone available to folks who experience a non-fatal overdose and are transported there, in addition to efforts at Valley Health Systems for peer linkage for people who come in who have a non-fatal overdose and are looking for linkage. So as Brandon mentioned, we're very proud of the distribution of naloxone that the health district and our partners achieved in 2025. That was the first time we hit our saturation goal for the county, something that we've been tracking for 3 or 4 years to really increase those efforts. And that's in part due to additional funding and funding sources and support from FR-CARA, our COSEP grant that's listed up here, and the State Opioid Response Grant. I'll wrap up briefly here with just some critical next steps. I think our team has really closely followed the federal funding landscape and some of the uncertainty that's happened there. If there were federal funding gaps in these grants that I just mentioned, the state support that we have today is not sufficient to cover all of those gaps. The health district is the only big city that's not directly receiving opioid settlement funding, principally because we weren't a named party in the One Nevada agreement. And the strategic priorities that we have are really to look to sustain these existing programs that provide surveillance and critical intervention, fill gaps, and link people to care in our community, and looking for opportunities to bridge to prevent any type of service interruption. With additional opportunities, we would extend our linkage program to additional public safety and healthcare settings, continue work around post-overdose outreach and capacity across the community, work with partners to implement low barrier treatment access to reduce that time between intervention and treatment, and look to expand mobile outreach services in both reach and frequency using, again, that data to action approach. We thank you for the opportunity to share our work with this committee today and welcome your questions. Thank you.
And thank you both for joining us this afternoon. Members, any questions? We'll start with Assemblymember Bacchus, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just intrigued because obviously across the board, we're seeing a lot of struggles with like federal funding, uncertainty. It seems like a lot of the work you guys are doing is good work and needed. I have 2 questions. One was I kind of wanted to see what like the anticipated gap in funding that you may be experiencing. And 2, I was curious if Southern Nevada Health District is supplying, like kind of was trying to figure out who's supplying the Narcan to the different organizations, or if they're utilizing their own grant funding. Just kind of trying to wrap around that, because I know as a part of the state, we do have our opioid settlement funds, and it seems like this is like a funding that's on par. So kind of curious a little more. Jessica Johnson for the record, Assembly member, thank you so much for your questions. To answer your first question related to anticipated gap in funding, on a previous slide, I denoted that the FR-CARA, which is a SAMHSA grant, and the Bureau of Justice Assistance BJA COSEP grant are both slated to sunset in September 2026. At this time, we haven't seen additional notice of funding opportunities come out for those. So we are at this moment in time anticipating that they would sunset in September. Both other grants were in kind of a mid-year period performance with our Centers for Disease Control Prevention grant. I think we're moving into year 4 of 5. And the State Opioid Response SAMHSA grant comes to us through the state of Nevada, and I believe we're in year 2 of 3 for that particular grant. To answer your second question related to naloxone or Narcan supply in the community, the health district
sort of leads that effort for Clark County. We collaborate very closely with our partners at the state and CASAT through the University of Nevada, Reno, who is presently the lead distributor for many of the other counties across the state. We really try to work to coordinate so that agencies or community members are able to access naloxone and delay or to reduce any delays or shortages that may arise. So if anyone is watching today or interested in learning more about that, myself or Brandon would be happy to field any additional questions related to access.
Thank you so much for that. I was just looking at that FR CARA, and it looks like you're distributing to 400 community agencies. That's going to end in September of this year. So thank you for that information.
Next, we'll go to Assemblymember Flanagan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Just in understanding the numbers, you noted over 200,000 doses of the naloxone being distributed in less than 2,000 to casinos, and then reported that they reported 105 uses. Is there further tracking? So if you gave out first to 2,000, they used like 100 of them. How are you guys working together to correlate like what's happening and what the story really is?
Brandon DeLucy for the record. It's a tough data point to come by because while we do encourage agencies to report that, it's difficult when an overdose occurs to really, bring down the hammer and make them report that overdose to us. So it's been difficult. We have seen increases over time. So with the FR CARA survey, again, we've seen some increases, but we also can turn to our EMS data. And so we can look at any time naloxone has been administered by EMS. And so we can measure how much naloxone has increased over time, from 2020 into 2025. And so that's another indicator that we have available to us that we do monitor and measure.
Permission to add to that? Jessica Johnson for the record. I just wanted to add, one of the reasons that survey is voluntary is because overdose education and naloxone distribution is considered a best practice. And so creating additional barriers to access is not a recommended strategy. So we include this as an optional survey. It helps us share back with you how naloxone is utilized in the community, who is utilizing it, what survivorship might look like in terms of outreach efforts. But it's not recommended to create that in the same way that the health district does condom distribution. It's not required to track every instance of utilization.
Mr. Chair, may I have a quick follow-up?
Please follow.
So with regard to the number of data that you do you have it according to which property you distributed the product to? And do you track how many you gave to each property, what they reported using? It's basically looking to see if there's a way to paint a picture of where, and not to say any particular property is more likely than another to have an overdose situation, but just wondering how we can pinpoint more data to see where things are happening.
Brandon DeLucy for the record. So we do have those data. It's not necessarily an indicator for severity if a property reports more than another, just because it just depends on if their point of contact tends to report more. So it's more of that relationship building. Sometimes there's turnover, which then affects that data reporting. And so we tend to look at other data as well. So we can look at our non-fatal overdose data as well as our fatal overdose data. We have latitude and longitudinal data where we can pinpoint exactly where this is occurring. So we tend to look at that as well to inform kind of the overall picture. And you saw some of those heat maps, and that's using latitude and longitude data of where these residents have died. And we can create a heat map out of that. So we use multiple data sources. We don't tend to just put all our eggs in one basket just because there's some limitations with certain data sources. For example, that survey, but when you take it collectively, we can get a more accurate picture of what's going on in Clark County.
Senator Ling, please.
Thank you. So I noticed on your map on page 10 and 11, your heat maps for the overdose death, and how, I guess I'm looking at the non-resident one that's moved kind of down into Paradise. And do you have any information on that? Can you explain that further?
Yeah, so for our non-resident overdose death heat map, if you recall the time series that was reported, that was shown earlier, the frequency is not as great as that of our residents. So it's a smaller numerator, it's a smaller number of deaths, but the concentration is more concentrated in Paradise, in the Strip, and the downtown areas, as opposed to our resident deaths, which are pretty much occur.
So is that university? I'm sorry, is that university related? Because that's part of my district, so that's why I'm just asking.
So when we look at our resident deaths, like UNLV does have some hotspots, but for our non-residents, university related does not appear to be a hotspot for our non-residents.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, again, we thank you for joining us today, and we understand that this is a conversation that will continue, and appreciate your time. With that, we will have, just for clarity, these are our last presenters, but then afterwards we will be going into public comment. For those of you wishing to testify for public comment, we just encourage you to wait a little bit longer. But we at this time would like to invite from the Culinary Workers Union Local 226, Ms. Diana Valles, President, and Ted Papa George, Secretary Treasurer. Good afternoon, welcome. And whenever you're ready.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Flores and committee members. My name is Ted Papa George. I'm the Secretary Treasurer of the Culinary Workers Union Local 226. And I'm joined today by our union president, Deanna Valles. We have a few core points to make today. We proudly represent over 60,000 workers in the state of Nevada, almost all in Southern Nevada. And we just recently celebrated our 90th anniversary representing those workers. Again, very proud of that too. Now for us, this is about all of Nevada, though, not our members. Housekeeping operations are essential to Nevada. Our state has about 200,000 hotel guest rooms. The people who work in and stay in those rooms drive our state's hospitality and gaming industries across hundreds of world-class destinations, casino resorts, hotels, and motels. Those rooms are concentrated on a Strip, downtown, and the locals market here in Southern Nevada. But the locals market is only getting larger in Las Vegas, Laughlin, Reno, and other parts of the state, also very significant. Just a comment, Chairman Flores, thank you, because I think you underlined the breadth and the width of this hearing. That is not just the resort corridor, but the entire state of Nevada. And thank you for that. When you think about the different areas, whether it's the Boulder Strip, Locals Market, Reno, Laughlin, kind of similar to how gaming wins are collected, there's these different segments that we think would be very important to make sure that we figure out how can we discuss all of those areas. We all have a shared interest in improving housekeeping operations throughout the state, and that's why we're proud to testify here today. For us, this is about families and public safety. Each one of those 200,000 hotel rooms are occupied by customers and tourists with families, often in tow. The rooms are maintained by workers who have families, and they're looked after by security and police officers who have families. And our communities need those rooms and hallways to be safe places to stay and safe places to work. If not, tragedy, big or small, can spill out into our streets and onto social media and ruin our sense of public safety. And then, given the massive uncertainty and potential headwinds facing our industry in this economic climate right now, even increased perception of a lack of public safety is really unhelpful. The core threats we hear from our members are, as mentioned here, weapons, specifically guns, hard drugs, needle and sharp situations, and human trafficking. And then, but one additional recent issue to be addressed is the problem of unregulated hemp operations and fake dispensaries that have proliferated up and down the Strip and beyond. And as mentioned previously by many of the folks that have testified, to understand the extent of the issues and possible solutions, correct data is needed. Otherwise, again, we have opinions, and you'll hear President Baez speak on that. For us, this hearing is both about the big guys and the little guys. It's about hotel workers, both union and non-union, about on the Strip, downtown, in the north, Laughlin, gaming, non-gaming resorts and motels. Our state is home to some of the most powerfully publicly traded companies in the world. But so too, it is at home to independently owned companies with different means. Nevada also has big and little hotel operators, and all of that is great. This diversity is part of what makes our hospitality market special. But for us, the size of a company's budget shouldn't matter when it comes to guest and worker safety. And this hearing gives me hope that our state can take a good step forward with equal benefit for all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, welcome.
For the record, Diana Valles. Good afternoon, Chair Flores and members. Yes, we have many stories. For us, this study is about getting the data to point the way. We hear stories every day from workers, hard stories, stories that show we can do better when it comes to safety in the rooms and up on the floors. I work as a guest room attendant in one of those hotels. I have negotiated contracts for tens of thousands of guest room attendants. And as Ted said, we know the charge of this committee extends far beyond just our membership and beyond even the other kind of workers, housemen, runners, in-room dining, servers and bussers, bellmen and baggage handlers who go up into the hotel rooms every single day. This goes beyond just hotel workers and their families too. It's about the safety of guests and their families, and public safety officers and their families, and also the future health of our industry as a whole. We have mountains of stories, but we know data should lead the way. We know how to collaborate across labor and industry, and with government too. We're proud of our collaboration with every stakeholder and employer on safety. But if we want to do what's best for Nevada, for our economy, for our guests, for our workers at these big properties, and the small properties too, then we're just going to have to admit we need clear, it's easy to understand data that put us where we needed to be. Thank you.
And thank you both for joining us again, and all the folk you represent. Members, any questions? We'll start with Assemblymember Cole, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here. I just had a question. You had mentioned that you hear stories, I think you said horror stories. Do you have any data points from your perspective that you could share with the committee as to like grievances that maybe have been filed against properties where you have collective bargaining agreements? Because I think that might be important information for us to have. Thank you.
Well, go ahead, and then I'm going to say a couple things too, though.
Diana Valles for the record. Yes, we do. We have collection, we have statements from workers, we have grievances, we have just conversations that the workers always come to us to tell us those stories, and we have that, yes.
May I add, for the record, Ted Papa George, that but these three categories that we've characterized are not grievance issues, essentially. That's part of the problem. There are corollary type or maybe other type of things that may lead us to that. But what we've done is collect stories. Because when it comes to wages or benefits or layoffs or the things that we normally deal with on a grievance and what our job as a union, these issues in this hearing are somewhat outside of that. But we have done that. But we know it's just not good enough. And as our president Deanna said, that we can do better.
Thank you for that. Is there any reason, because there might be confidentiality issues or whatever, that you would not be able to share that information? We heard from the Resort Association that they do have like processes and procedures and different things. Specifically, I think we heard mostly on the human trafficking, the anti-human trafficking workforce, or those initiatives. So I would think that there would be some kind of a grievance issue there with what they're doing if they're not doing the things that they say that they're doing. But anything you could share would be helpful.
For the record, Ted Papa George, we'd love to do that. Again, it's, for example, there are policies and procedures that our members are trained on. For example, if they find a towel with the needle rolled up in the towel. But what happens after that, that's not a grievance, so that gets reported. And then we don't know what happens after that. That's in the realm of I think you heard Metro report, that's the realm of the security team. And then does that get to the health district? Does that get to Metro? We will just say that we have some frustration with that. And the partners that you met here today, we have great relationships. But again, this issue of trying to figure out a way that, again, some of the folks here proposed to come up with ways to have data that is easy to understand and a systematic way to collect it. We just agree with that wholeheartedly. But that's just one example. Same thing if a weapon is found in a nightstand. There is a process by somebody like Deanna who worked in the hotels in the housekeeping. There is a policy required of what to do with that. But we have folks here you'll see in public comment to testify on sometimes on how that goes.
Any follow-up?
No, I don't think so. But I think what I'm hearing is that if there was a reverse reporting mechanism where something gets reported by a worker, the rolled up syringe, and then if they were to find out where that landed, right? Like, did it result in an arrest or something? That might be helpful information to come out of the committee if that were to go back to that person.
For the record, Ted Papa George, we think so. We're not sure, but we're hoping that'll be a result of these hearings. But what we believe is that these issues are significant, but we can't tell exactly how significant.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, I guess the question that I'd put on the table, and we're going to hear directly from some folk as you indicated, so I suppose we could ask them as well. But when you're interacting with your members, could you share, and this is obviously anecdotally, but concerns that they've raised within these buckets? Because obviously when there is an arrest, we understand that there's involvement with law enforcement. But I guess my concern is that there may be a situation where your members feel that after there's a report, we treat things differently, right? Because it was just drugs and maybe somebody was partying and that it's just correlated to partying, and then the conversation ends there. Or if somebody reports, look, I often see this person here and going into different rooms, I suspect that may be a human trafficking issue. Does that get shared? And then is there a concern that that doesn't go anywhere beyond that afterwards? Because there's no way to prove it. Yeah, we see that human here a lot, but we don't know if they in fact are anything. Maybe they just come here to the hotel a lot. Or so I'm just curious to know if you could share a little bit about that, if anything.
Yeah, going back to the stories, right? Like, what is it that the members are telling us? We heard stories about, to give you an example, like a member who find in the restroom the word help on their bathroom mirror. And she reported to the supervisor, and they say the supervisor was like, don't worry about it, just keep working. And like, you're gonna hear from more members later on, but there's like, when they find drugs, when they find guns, wrap it in towels or under the mattresses. What happened? I think we have the data, that's what we're looking for here. As of right now, we don't know the magnitude of the problem. We don't know. People probably think that it's an isolated case, but in reality, nobody knows. Like, let's say it's just opinions. We don't know exactly what's going on. What we know is that we have members reporting to us constantly about drugs, guns, and suspicions of sex trafficking. That's what we know, and we live every day by that. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Bacchus, please.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just had a question, just because it's more of my own ignorance than probably not, but because you talked about needles that are being found in rooms. I know we had this as a struggle this last, I guess maybe this last legislative session or in 2023, where we didn't even have testing capabilities to check if it's fentanyl or what it is. But there's a high rise of needles being associated with weight loss, the GLP drug, as well as people taking prescriptions. I guess I'm struggling with that. Are there I'm assuming you have to dispose everything, whether it's in a trash can. How do you know? And I guess, that's a void that I keep thinking also is another layer to the finding of needles. And I was just kind of thinking of that. Or even diabetics, I know they have to use needles as well.
And again, I think that's why we're trying to get the data, right? Because they find these things and we don't know if it is drug or it's not a drug. But the members, they don't know that. The worker who work in the hotel, they only know that they find a needle and they don't know what is that, but that they suspicious because there were probably a big party there in the room, and then they find needles in the room, or if they're hide it somewhere, they in towels or stuff, they're like, okay, is this a drug or not? And I reported it, and we don't know what happened.
Next, we'll go to Assemblymember Flanagan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a point of clarification, I guess, in terms of what is able to be tracked. If a situation or incident occurs, if a member of the culinary union is hurt or compromised, I assume a report is taken and you're entitled to a situation like that to track data to see where that is. But if the person is working, cleaning the room, and they just find paraphernalia, drug paraphernalia, and they report that, then you don't get any further information when something like that happens. But if they're injured, say they touch a needle and they find it accidentally and they're poked or pricked with it, you would be able to track that incident, but not just a general discovery.
For the record, Ted Papa George. So for example, if somebody's hurt or injured, then it's a workers' comp issue. But does the member report it? Do they turn it in? And then the question is, or do they turn it into us? But that's where that would head. And we do have the ability, if we have a sense there's some sort of wrongdoing towards the member, workers' comp is out of the spectrum of our contracts. It's a state issue, but it's not a contractual issue. But if we feel that's the company is not following proper procedures and there's some sort of disparate treatment or something like that for our members, then there could be a grievance again about disparate treatment towards a member, something like that. But if there is something along the lines of if you see something, say something type of situation that you're trained on and you follow the procedure, we have the ability as a union, if we connect it to a wrongdoing by the company, a grievance that is covered by our contractual language, then we would have the right to that data. If you follow the policy and then the company writes you up and says you didn't follow the policy, then that member could come and file a grievance, for example. But if you follow the policy, and then it goes off to that data collection of whatever it is, we don't necessarily have the right to that information.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, again, thank you both for joining us today, and thank you for working with leadership on all sides of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And with that, we will now move on to the next item of our agenda, which is public comment. I want to remind those of you wishing to join us for public comment that you please limit your remarks to 2 minutes. And then after public comment, or better said, before public comment, I also want to remind folks that this is a conversation that's going to continue, and I look forward to working alongside all of you. With that, anybody wishing to come in for public comment, if you could please come forward, either in Carson City or Las Vegas, please occupy all 3 seats. I don't see anybody in Carson City, so we will focus on Las Vegas. Good afternoon, thank you for joining us. Whoever wishes to go first. That works perfectly. Welcome.
We gotta hit this on. Hi, my name is Diana Thomas. I've been a guest room attendant and a culinary union member for over 26 years. One day I opened the guest room door. I saw an older man, late 40s, with a very young man, maybe about 16 or 17. As soon as I came in, the young man hid under the covers. The older man looked ashamed. I knew right away something wasn't right. I stepped out of the room in shock, sat there thinking, that's a kid. It's not the only time. I often see young girls, late teens, maybe about 16 or 17, with older men. I once found a bag of cocaine left right on the counter. I took a picture, called security because I didn't want to be blamed if the guest came back. It took security about an hour to show up. When the guard finally came, he took the cocaine, put it in his pocket, and I don't know what he did with it after that. In the hallway exit stairwells, I see needles, condoms, and people doing drugs. We don't have sharp containers on our cart. I worry about stepping on a needle or one of my coworkers accidentally getting stuck. Housekeepers are often in the hallway in the towers by ourselves. We need safety equipment that works. We deserve to go to work without wondering if today is the day we get stuck by a needle or caught between a gun and an angry guest, or walk into a room where a kid is in a crisis. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Welcome.
My name is Jolene Reyes. I have been a porter for 15 years and a culinary union member. And this past New Year's Eve, I was cleaning a restroom where I found a gun hidden in the trash can underneath the trash bag. I was alone and I got nervous and shaken, but I had to keep working because it was busy. I reported it. Security shut down the restroom, took the gun, and I was moved to a different floor. I don't know what happened next. A few days later, I found pocket knives hidden in a sanitary napkin bag. That time, it took security over 30 minutes to respond. It is common to find weapons in restrooms once or twice a month, knives, scissors, and sometimes guns. I've also seen guests walking through common areas with guns concealed in their waistbands. Security is present, but I do not hear them say anything. I've seen women injecting in a public bathroom sink with needles in their veins and spoons with liquid on the counter. On club nights, I've seen people snorting lines and leaving baggies and uncapped needles in the trash can. I've had to clean this up with tongs and sharps containers. But I am surprised that I have not gotten training from the company on how to safely dispose of these hazards. I've also seen what I believe to be signs of sex trafficking. Teenage girls, maybe 15 or 16 years old, coming into the restroom crying and scared, leaving to meet older men waiting right outside the women's restroom. I reported to security and been told, if you see her again, call us. But I do not see any detail. I do not know if any detailed statements were taken or what follow-up was done. We are given safety buttons, but once a drunk guest grabbed my wrist, my safety button did not work. I waited 30 to 45 minutes for security, but by then the guest was gone. No one ever came from the company to take a statement. When workers are alone and facing dangerous situations, we need safety equipment that we can count on. That means safety devices that are tested and working, and security that responds when we call them. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Good afternoon, welcome.
Hi, my name is Marlena Bruce. I'm a guest room attendant and I've been a culinary union member for 8 years. A couple of years ago, I was working as a GRA at a small hotel off strip. I was cleaning the checkout room. In the bathroom, the big white towels were stored under the sink. I pulled the towels out because I needed to clean underneath. When I did that, a gun dropped out of the towels and hit the floor. I screamed, I was shaking. All I could think was, Lord, thank you, that didn't go off. Thank you, I didn't get shot. My supervisor came up, saw it was a gun and called security. They took it away. I had no training on what to do if I found a gun. I was on my own in that moment. They told me to take a break and even said I could go home, but I ended up pulling myself together and finishing my work. At my property, I have found needles. I've seen them in the ice bucket with a little plastic bag still in there like it was never used. One time I opened an ice bucket that was in the bathroom and there was an uncapped needle sitting inside. We're told don't touch it, call the supervisor and they will come with a sharps container. But it takes a while and in the meantime, I keep working, always worried I could get stuck any day. We hardly ever see security on the floors. Our rooms are close to the stairwells where we run into a lot of homeless people. I worry about getting attacked and thrown down the stairs and nobody would know. Every worker in these hotels needs safety equipment that actually works. Buttons that are tested regularly and go straight to security the moment we press them. We need regular security, walking the floors and the stairwells, and we need real hand-on training so that when we find guns or needles, we know exactly what to do and we don't have to just hope nothing bad happens. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Good afternoon, welcome. And I believe your microphone might be turned off. It'll turn green when it's on. There it is.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman and members. For the record, my name is Maureen Kimbrough. I'm a guest room attendant. I've been working at my casino for 8 years, and I've been a culinary member for 1 year. We have safety panic buttons. We're supposed to keep our doors closed when we clean, and they track our doors in the computer on live. There are guards near the elevators, but there are also still serious gaps, especially around drugs and guns. Around 2018, 2019, I went into a suite to clean. On the coffee table in the living room, I saw a rolled dollar bill and white powder. I knew what I was looking at. That wasn't a tip. That was drugs. I didn't touch it. I reported it to my manager and left the room for them to handle. I also see pills and capsules in rooms all the time. Some are in prescription bottles, some are just on the table or next to the bed. We were told if you see something, say something, but nobody sits down and trains us on how to tell a regular pill from an illegal drug pill. I can report, but I don't really know what I'm looking at. Ever since the October 1 shooting, I look at luggage differently. In our meetings, they told us to watch for things like golf bags or other types of bags that are so heavy it feels like there's metal inside. If I see a bag like that, I report it right away because I'm thinking, what if there are weapons in there? But it shouldn't just be on housekeepers to spot that. Lawmakers need to make sure there are stronger rules and protections so guns can't so easily come into hotels in the first place. The safety panic buttons and guards help, but we still need better training on the drugs we are seeing, and we need stronger protection regarding weapons in hotels. Hotel housekeepers shouldn't have to be the first line of defense against drugs and guns. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Good afternoon, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Flores and the committee. My name is Joe Spica, and I'm a bellman, and I've been a culinary member for over 15 years. I want to talk about what it's like going up into these hotel rooms, the rooms and hallways where people think nobody's watching, and how workers like me are walking into dangerous situations with almost no real protection. On my 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. shift, I see it all the time. Younger working girls going up the elevators with older guys. 20, 30 minutes later, I see the girl come down, crying, obviously in distress. She'll look for a security guard and say, he did that, he did this, but she doesn't want to press any charges. She's an escort. I don't know what happens when security investigates. I've walked into a room where there are literal piles of cocaine. It looks like a winter snowfest. I've reported it, and what happens depend on who the guest is. Regular guests might get evicted. VIPs, who knows? It goes through butlers, and I have no idea what happens next. I've opened up an ice closet where the ice machines are at up in the towers, and I found a homeless person doing crack in the dark. I've checked out a room with multiple Pelican cases, and who knows what's inside of them, in a room with a balcony, and it makes my stomach sink, and I immediately think of October 1. I walk hallways and I hear screaming through the doors, I'm going to kill you. I hear people fighting and arguing on the other side, and all I can do is call security and hope they call and do something. Workers going into these towers need backup, and that starts with safety equipment that is tested, working, and in every frontline worker's hands before they start their shift. We need trained, qualified security guards who respond quickly when we call. We need real enforcements of policies on guns, drugs, and violence in the rooms and towers. We need working safety buttons so frontline workers aren't the only line of defense between the public and a disaster. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Welcome.
My name is Cheryl Zanik. I am guest room attendant, and I have been a culinary union member since 2021. I want you to understand what my job is really like behind those hotel room doors. At work, I am often the only GRA on a floor alone with my cart holding the door open. I regularly see very young-looking girls under 18 moving through the tower with one slightly older male. It's usually 2 younger girls and 1 young man using stairwells where there are no cameras and going in and out of rooms on floors that are supposed to be out of order. I regularly see condoms, condom wrappers, blankets, and pillows that were originally in the hotel rooms but are found in the hallways and the stairwells. On top of that, I constantly find needles and drug paraphernalia, hypodermic needles hidden in tissue boxes and toilet paper rolls, in trash cans, Narcan inhalers, and aluminum foil that could be used for fentanyl. There are no sharps containers on our carts, so I bought my own sharps container and bring it from home because security often doesn't show up in time. I see guns about every 2 to 3 months. In one room, a third-party cleaner found a 9mm handgun in a drawer and slammed it on the desk, pointed directly at me before taking out the clip. I could have actually been shot that day. I had to call dispatch and turn the gun to point at the wall so security wouldn't walk in staring down the barrel. When I report things, the best I get is a day or 2 of extra patrols. The last time I reported a man who had been 86 from the property, management tried to fire me. In fact, I saw him this week at work. Everyone at work knows what happened to me. So at my casino, the message is clear. You do not see anything and you do not say anything. I never feel safe at work. No one should have to choose between keeping their job and telling the truth about guns, drugs, and concerns about underage girls in their hotel. Thank you.
And thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to come forward to testify, or excuse me, to provide public comment? With everybody's permission, please come forward. With everybody's permission, I did speak with some folk before I came in Spanish, so I'm just going to make that announcement in Spanish. Si alguien gusta testiguar en español, con mucho gusto me ofrezco yo para ayudar a traducir. Únicamente hay que pasar a la silla de enfrente y les pido que incluyan pausas para que yo pueda traducir mientras comparten su testimonio en español, si gustan hacerlo. Please continue.
Yes, for the record, my name is David Martinez. I wasn't really scheduled to work today, but just being here with my fellow co-workers, union members, I want to come forward. I've been working for the casinos for 32 years. I started when I was 17. I worked room service when I was 21, and we did see a lot of stuff that could be human trafficking, drugs for sure, we saw all the time. But I guess our population here in Vegas is 700,000. So that's 700,000 people that see something, say something. But there's millions of people coming into Vegas that say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So that's a big problem that we do have. Like we were talking earlier, sometimes we do report problems at work, maybe gets investigated. The problem is we don't know if all this stuff, all this data is being put out there. We see stuff at the hotels all year long, all the time. I never see it on the news. Some stuff are so big that it can't be kept from the news. But as far as safety for us workers in the hotels, I've seen a decrease in security. Like I said, when I used to work room service, we used to see 4 or 5 securities walking up and down all day. Now you're lucky if you see one. So to me, I've just seen a decrease in security. I don't know the casinos if it's budget, but as far as safety, half the time working with the public, we don't feel 100% safe. I know not every place, it's not always going to be 100% safe, but I feel that we need, it's something that needs to be brought to a higher standard for employee safety as well as customers. As we see fights in the casino sometimes, by the time security gets there, people that were fighting were gone. So I don't know if it's a budget issue or what it is, but like I said, we have like 700,000 people here in Vegas that say, see something, say something, but millions that say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So that's all. I wanted to say that today.
And thank you, sir, for joining us today. Thank you for accompanying us. Anybody else wishing to join us for public comment, if you could please come forward. And if there's anybody else, feel free to sit down at the table. You don't have to wait for each individual person to come up. If there's anybody else, please come forward now. We have 3 chairs, so we can use all 3. Good afternoon, welcome, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. ¿Me podría ayudar a traducir?
Claro que sí.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Irma Hernández para el récord.
¿Me repite su nombre, por favor?
Irma Hernández.
Listo.
Mi testimonio es hace 3 años. Reporté un incidente que pasó en las suites grandes que se llaman penthouse. Encontré 8 notas diciendo ayuda. La primera estaba escondida en el sillón. La otra estaba escondida en la caja fuerte. Otra estaba escondida en el baño y arriba de un espejo. Y las demás estaban en el piso, pero cada vez las notas estaban como que estaban escritas con miedo.
My name is Irma Hernandez. 3 years ago, I wanted to share a personal account. 3 years ago, while I was working in the penthouse, I found 8 notes, all asking for help. I found one in the bathroom, safety deposit box, and others were found were found around the room, and all of them I could make clear that she was very afraid.
Lo reporté con seguridad con mi supervisora primeramente y con seguridad. No sé exactamente qué pasó, pero sí sé que en esa suite solamente había una persona, no había niños, no había mujeres y se había usado las 3 camas que tenía esa habitación.
And I initially reported to security, I mean, my supervisor first. And I know that there was no women, that there was no kids in that suite, but that there was 3 bedrooms and all 3 were used.
Gracias.
Thank you. Gracias por acompañarnos. Anybody else wishing to come forward? Seeing nobody coming forward, we will go to the phone lines. Do we have anybody wishing to join us over the phone?
Thank you, Chair. The public lines are open and working, but there are no callers to provide public comment at this time.
Understood. Thank you. Well, I once again want to thank all the workers, all the nonprofits, law enforcement, our resorts for working together today and the days leading up to this meeting and for the work that will continue to be done after this meeting. I appreciate everybody's diligence and I look forward to this conversation leading us to a place that will make it a better state and safer place for all of you. With that, members, we don't have a specified date that we will be meeting for sure. We do have one that we have in mind, but I don't want to put it on the record until we're 100% sure that it's one that works for all of you. So please just be on the lookout for an email. And thank you all for your work and your great questions. This meeting's adjourned.